The fluorescent lights of Green's Market buzzed overhead as Catherine Hale stood frozen at the customer service counter, her empty basket hanging limply from her trembling hand. The store manager, a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a permanent scowl, held her declined credit application like it was contaminated. "I'm sorry, Ms. Hale, but we can't extend you store credit," he said, his voice carrying across the checkout lanes. "Your application has been denied. Company policy." Catherine felt the heat rise in her cheeks as nearby shoppers turned to stare. A woman in a red coat whispered to her companion, their eyes sliding over Catherine's worn jacket and faded jeans. The basket in her hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She had come here with a list, a plan, a desperate hope that this one store might give her a chance where others had not. "Please," Catherine said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a job interview next week. I just need enough to get through until then. My daughter hasn't had a proper meal in 2 days." The manager's expression didn't soften. If anything, his jaw tightened. "I understand your situation, ma'am, but I don't make the rules. You'll need to try somewhere else." Somewhere else. Catherine had already tried somewhere else. She tried everywhere. 3 months ago, she'd lost her job at the textile factory when it closed down without warning. Her savings, meager to begin with, had evaporated paying rent and keeping the lights on. Her parents were gone, taken by a car accident 5 years earlier. Her sister lived 3 states away with problems of her own. There was no safety net, no fallback plan, no one to call. Just Catherine and her 7-year-old daughter Bella, trying to survive in a world that seemed determined to grind them down. "Thank you for your time," Catherine managed, setting the basket on the counter with as much dignity as she could gather. She turned toward the exit, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in public. The automatic doors opened with a cheerful chime that mocked her misery. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Catherine stood on the sidewalk, uncertain where to go or what to do next. She had exactly $4.63 in her wallet. There was half a jar of peanut butter at home, some crackers that had gone soft, and a can of soup she'd been saving. How do you tell your child there's no food? How do you explain that the world doesn't care if she's hungry? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly neighbor who watched Bella after school. "Bella keeps asking when you'll be home with groceries. I gave her some cookies, but she says she wants to save her appetite for dinner. Such a sweet girl." Catherine's throat tightened. Bella, with her bright smile and boundless trust that her mother would always take care of her. Bella, who never complained, who colored pictures to cheer Catherine up, who said her prayers every night thanking God for their little apartment and each other. What kind of mother can't even feed her child? "Excuse me." The voice came from behind her, deep and calm. Catherine wiped quickly at her eyes before turning. A man stood a few feet away, probably in his late 30s, with dark brown hair touched with gray at the temples. He wore jeans and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His face was kind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. "I'm sorry to bother you," he continued, taking a small step closer. "I was inside the store. I couldn't help but overhear what happened at the counter." Fresh humiliation washed over Catherine. Of course someone had heard. Everyone had heard. She lifted her chin, trying to salvage some scrap of pride. "I'm fine. Thank you." "I don't think you are," the man said gently. "And that's okay. My name is Paul. Paul Henderson." He extended his hand. Catherine hesitated, then shook it. His grip was warm and firm. "Catherine Hale," she said. "Catherine," Paul repeated as if testing the name. "I know we just met and I know this might sound strange, but I'd like to help you. I heard you say your daughter needs food. Let me buy you groceries." Catherine's first instinct was to refuse. She'd been raised to be independent, to handle her own problems, to never take handouts. But then she thought of Bella's face, those wide brown eyes looking up at her with absolute faith that Mommy would fix everything. "I can't ask you to do that," she said, but her voice wavered. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Paul's expression was earnest, with no trace of pity or condescension. "Please. It would mean a lot to me." "Why?" The question burst out before Catherine could stop it. "Why would you do this for a complete stranger?" Paul was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because someone did it for me once when I needed it most. And because no child should go hungry when I have the means to prevent it." He looked back at her, his brown eyes steady. "Come with me. I'll fill your table tonight." Catherine's hands shook. Every instinct screamed that she should refuse, that accepting help from a stranger was dangerous, that she should maintain her pride. But pride couldn't feed Bella. Pride couldn't put food in an empty stomach or take away the worried crease in her daughter's forehead when she thought Catherine wasn't looking. "Okay," Catherine whispered. "Thank you." Paul smiled, and it transformed his face, erasing years of some private sadness Catherine could only guess at. "Thank you for letting me help. Sometimes that takes more courage than doing it alone." He gestured toward the store entrance. "Shall we?" Catherine followed him back through the automatic doors, past the customer service counter where the manager now stood helping another customer. The man glanced up, his eyes widening slightly when he saw Catherine with Paul, but she ignored him. Paul grabbed a shopping cart, then a second one. "Do you have a list?" he asked. Catherine pulled out the crumpled paper from her jacket pocket, smoothing it against her palm. "Bread, milk, eggs, rice, chicken, vegetables, peanut butter, pasta, sauce, cereal, fruit. The basics. The things that would stretch across a week if she was careful." Paul took the list, studied it, then handed it back. "Let's start there and see what else you might need." They moved through the aisles together. Catherine selected items hesitantly at first, acutely aware of the cost of each thing that went into the cart. But Paul noticed her restraint and quietly added extra items. A larger package of chicken breasts, a variety of fresh vegetables, good coffee, orange juice, a package of cookies. "Does Bella have a favorite cereal?" he asked as they stood in the breakfast aisle. "The one with the marshmallows," Catherine admitted. "But the store brand is fine." Paul put 3 boxes of the name brand into the cart. Every kid deserves their favorite cereal sometimes. They continued through the store. Paul added things Catherine would never have thought to ask for. Spices to make the food taste better, a warm loaf of fresh bakery bread, a roasted chicken from the deli counter that Catherine could serve for dinner tonight. He asked questions about Bella, about her favorite foods and any allergies, and listened carefully to every answer. In the clothing section, Paul paused. "How old is Bella?" "7. She'll be 8 next month." "Does she need winter clothes?" "I noticed it's getting colder." Catherine's throat tightened again. Bella had been wearing the same coat for 2 years, the sleeves now too short, the zipper broken. "She could use a new coat," Catherine admitted quietly. Paul picked out a warm purple coat in Bella's size, thick and well-made, the kind that would last for years. He added a matching hat and gloves, then a few shirts and a pair of sturdy shoes. "You don't have to," Catherine protested weakly. "I know," Paul said simply. "I want to." By the time they reached the checkout, both carts were full. Catherine watched the total climb on the register screen, her heart pounding. $200. $300. $400. The number kept rising, and with it, her sense of overwhelming debt to this stranger who asked for nothing in return. The final total was $647.32. Paul handed over his credit card without blinking, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. The cashier, a young woman with bright green hair, smiled at them like they were a couple doing their weekly shopping together. "Do you need help out to your car?" she asked. "That would be great, thank you," Paul said. A teenage boy in a store vest appeared with a flatbed cart and helped them load all the bags. Catherine followed Paul across the parking lot, still half convinced she was dreaming, that she would wake up any moment back on the sidewalk with her empty basket and empty hands. Paul's car was a modest dark blue sedan, clean but several years old. Not what she'd expected somehow. He popped the trunk and they began loading the bags. "Where do you live?" Paul asked. "I'll help you carry everything inside." Catherine hesitated. Her apartment was in the rundown section of town, in a building with peeling paint and a landlord who only fixed things when threatened with legal action. She didn't want Paul to see how she lived, but she also couldn't carry all these bags on the bus. "Oak Street," she said finally. "The Riverside Apartments. Building C." If Paul recognized the neighborhood's reputation, he didn't show it. "Hop in. We'll get this to your daughter." The drive took 15 minutes through early evening traffic. Paul kept the conversation light, asking about the weather, the city, safe topics that didn't require Catherine to explain her whole sad story. She was grateful for that. She'd told enough of it already. When they pulled into the apartment complex, Catherine directed him to her building. It looked worse than usual in the fading light, the cracked sidewalk, the flickering light over the entrance, the rust stains on the metal railings. "3rd floor," Catherine said. "There's no elevator." "Good exercise," Paul said cheerfully. They made 4 trips up the stairs, arms loaded with bags. Catherine unlocked the door to apartment 3F, her home for the past 3 years. It was small, just 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, and a living room barely big enough for their second-hand couch and TV. But it was clean, she made sure of that. The walls might be scuffed and the carpet stained, but everything was tidy and organized. "Mommy?" Bella burst from her bedroom, her face lighting up like sunrise. She was small for 7, with Catherine's dark brown skin and big eyes, her hair pulled back in 2 puffs tied with yellow ribbons. She wore a blue dress that used to be her favorite but was now a bit too small. "Baby girl," Catherine said, setting down the bags to catch Bella in a hug. "Were you good for Mrs. Rodriguez?" "Yes, ma'am. She taught me how to make a cat's cradle with string." Bella's eyes went wide as she saw the grocery bags. "Is that all food?" "It is," Catherine said. "Thanks to this kind man. Bella, this is Mr. Henderson. Can you say hello?" Bella turned to Paul, suddenly shy. "Hello, Mr. Henderson. Thank you for helping my mommy." Paul crouched down to Bella's level, his expression gentle. "You're very welcome, Bella. And please call me Paul. Mr. Henderson makes me feel old." Bella giggled. "You have gray in your hair like my teacher, Mr. Roberts." "Bella," Catherine said, mortified, but Paul laughed. "I do indeed. Getting older every day." He stood back up, surveying the apartment. His gaze lingered on the portable heater in the corner, the thermostat on the wall that Catherine kept turned low to save money, the window where cold air seeped through gaps in the frame. "Let's get these groceries put away," Paul said, rolling up his sleeves. Together they unpacked everything. Catherine's small refrigerator and cabinets had never been so full. Bella danced around them, exclaiming over each item like it was Christmas morning. The cookies, the fresh fruit, the juice boxes Paul had snuck into the cart. When the roasted chicken came out, Bella's eyes went huge. "A whole chicken. Can we have it for dinner?" "We can," Catherine said, her voice thick. "Why don't you go wash your hands?" Bella scampered off to the bathroom. Paul was folding the empty bags, stacking them neatly by the door. Catherine watched him, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "This is more than I could have hoped for." Paul shook his head. "You don't need to thank me." Seeing Bella's face was thanks enough. He paused, then continued carefully. "Catherine, I noticed your heater. And the thermostat. It's going to get colder. Do you have heat?" Catherine's face flushed. "The building heat is supposed to come on in another week. Until then, the space heater works fine." Paul's expression suggested he didn't believe that, but he didn't argue. Instead, he pulled a business card from his wallet. "This is my number. If you need anything at all, please call me. Even if it's just to talk." Catherine took the card. It was simple, elegant. Paul Henderson, Henderson Consulting, followed by a phone number and email address. "Consulting?" she asked. "Business consulting. I help companies improve their operations, their efficiency." "It's boring stuff, really?" Paul smiled. "But it pays the bills." Bella returned, her hands dripping wet. Catherine grabbed a towel for her while Paul moved toward the door. "I should get going," he said. "Let you two enjoy your dinner." "Wait," Catherine said impulsively. Paul turned back. "Would you like to stay? For dinner?" "It's the least I can do, and there's plenty of chicken." Paul's face softened. For a moment, Catherine thought she saw loneliness flicker in his eyes, a mirror of her own. But then he smiled and shook his head gently. "That's kind of you, but I think tonight should be for you and Bella. You've had a hard day and you deserve time together." He reached for the doorknob, then paused. "But Catherine, I'd like to ask you something. Would you and Bella like to come to dinner at my house tomorrow evening? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. A possible job opportunity." Catherine's heart skipped. "A job? My assistant just gave notice. She's moving to another state to be closer to family. I need someone organized, responsible, and honest. From what I saw today, how you handled yourself with grace under difficult circumstances, I think you might be perfect for it." Paul looked at her seriously. "I know we just met. I know this is all very sudden. But I believe in listening to my instincts, and my instincts say you're someone I'd like to work with. Would you at least consider coming to dinner to discuss it?" Catherine couldn't breathe. A job. A real job with a man who had proven himself kind and generous. It felt too good to be true, but hadn't she been praying for exactly this? For a chance, for an opportunity, for someone to see her as more than just another struggling single mother? "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, we'll come. Thank you, Paul. 6 o'clock tomorrow. I'll text you the address." Paul smiled at them both. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Bella." "Good night, Paul," Bella chirped. The door closed behind him, and Catherine stood in her small kitchen, surrounded by more food than she'd had in months, holding a business card that might be her ticket to a better life. Bella tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, is Paul nice?" Catherine looked down at her daughter, at the hope and trust in those eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. For the first time in so long she felt it too. "Oh, Yes, baby, she said. I think he might be one of the nicest people we've ever met. That night, after they'd eaten chicken and vegetables and Bella had gone to bed with a full stomach and a smile on her face, Catherine sat alone in the dim living room. She turned Paul's business card over in her hands, reading it again and again. Tomorrow she would go to his house. Tomorrow she would interview for a job that might change everything. Tomorrow she would take another step forward. But tonight she would simply be grateful. Grateful for a stranger's kindness, for a full refrigerator, for the sound of her daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room. Catherine closed her eyes and whispered a prayer into the darkness. Thank you. Thank you for sending someone who cared. In her bedroom, Bella dreamed of purple coats and cookies and a kind man with gray in his hair who had made her mommy smile again. And across town, in his own quiet house, Paul Henderson sat at his kitchen table, thinking about a woman with tired eyes and a daughter with a beautiful laugh, and wondering if maybe, just maybe, he had found something he didn't even know he'd been looking for. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought hope. And sometimes hope is enough to change everything. Have you ever watched someone struggle and wished you could help? Have you ever been in Catherine's shoes, standing on the edge of hope and despair? Drop a comment below sharing a time when someone's kindness changed your day, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these heartwarming stories that remind us love and compassion still exist in this world. The next evening, Catherine stood in front of her bathroom mirror, trying to make herself presentable for dinner at Paul's house. She had exactly two nice outfits. A green dress she'd worn to job interviews and a navy skirt with a white blouse. She chose the dress, simple and modest, pairing it with her only good shoes. Bella sat on the closed toilet lid, watching her mother with interest. You look pretty, Mommy. Thank you, sweet girl. Catherine smoothed the dress one more time, then turned to her daughter. Are you ready? Bella nodded eagerly. She wore her best outfit too, a maroon dress with white flowers that Catherine had bought at a thrift store months ago. Her hair was styled in neat braids, tied off with white ribbons. She looked beautiful and innocent, and Catherine's heart swelled with love. Paul had texted the address that morning along with a message, looking forward to seeing you both. Dinner is casual, so please come comfortable. The address led them to a quiet suburban neighborhood about 20 minutes from their apartment. Catherine had taken the bus as far as she could, then walked the last 6 blocks, holding Bella's hand the entire way. The houses here were nice but not ostentatious. Well-kept lawns, 2-car garages, trees lining the streets. Catherine had expected something grander based on Paul's generosity the day before, but this felt normal, lived in. Number 42 was a 2-story house painted soft gray with white trim. Flower beds lined the front walk, though most of the plants had gone dormant for the coming winter. A porch light glowed warmly in the gathering dusk. Catherine rang the doorbell, her stomach fluttering with nerves. Paul answered almost immediately, wearing khaki pants and a green polo shirt. His face lit up when he saw them. Catherine, Bella, right on time. Come in, please. The house interior was warm and inviting. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture in earth tones, and walls lined with bookshelves. Photos hung in simple frames. Paul with an older couple who must be his parents, Paul at what looked like a college graduation, Paul with a beautiful woman with blonde hair and a bright smile. Your home is lovely, Catherine said. Thank you. It's too big for just me, but I bought it years ago and never could bring myself to leave. Paul gestured toward the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready. I hope you both like pasta. We love pasta, Bella said, then clapped her hand over her mouth, remembering her manners. Paul laughed. Good, because I made enough to feed 10 people. I tend to overcook. The kitchen was spacious and clean, with granite counters and stainless steel appliances. A pot of water boiled on the stove, and the smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air. A salad sat ready in a large wooden bowl, and fresh bread rested on a cutting board. Can I help with anything? Catherine offered. You can keep me company while I finish up. Bella, would you like to see the backyard? I have a bird feeder that's pretty popular with the local wildlife. Bella looked at Catherine for permission. Go ahead, baby. Stay where I can see you through the window. Bella skipped to the glass door leading to the backyard, pressing her nose against it. Paul drained the pasta, then began assembling everything at the table. Catherine stood awkwardly, wanting to help but not wanting to intrude. You can sit, Paul said gently. You're my guest, not my employee. Not yet, anyway. Catherine sat at the kitchen table watching him work. He moved with ease, clearly comfortable in his space. How long have you lived here? 10 years this past spring. My wife and I bought it together. He nodded toward one of the photos on the wall, the one with the blonde woman. That's Hannah. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm so sorry, Catherine said softly. Paul's smile was sad but genuine. Thank you. She was wonderful. Kind, funny, patient with me when I worked too much. We had 12 good years together before she got sick. I count myself lucky for that time. He brought the serving dishes to the table, then called Bella in from the backyard. They sat together, the three of them, and for a moment Catherine felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life. A normal family dinner, with good food and pleasant conversation and no worry about where the next meal would come from. Paul served generous portions, encouraging Bella to try everything. He asked her about school, about her favorite subjects, about her friends. Bella, normally shy with strangers, opened up under his genuine interest. I like reading best, she said around a mouthful of pasta. And art. I'm not very good at math. Math can be tricky, Paul agreed. I wasn't good at it either until I had a teacher who showed me it was just solving puzzles. Once I thought of it that way, it got easier. Really? Bella's eyes widened. Maybe I can think of it like that too. Catherine watched them interact, something warm and unexpected blooming in her chest. Paul was good with children, natural and easy. He treated Bella with respect, not talking down to her the way some adults did. After dinner, Paul brought out dessert, a store-bought chocolate cake that Bella devoured with enthusiasm. Then he suggested they move to the living room to talk. Bella, there are some books on that shelf that belong to my niece, Paul said, pointing. Feel free to look through them if you'd like. Bella settled happily on the floor with a stack of picture books while Catherine and Paul sat on the couch, a respectful distance between them. So, Paul began. The job. Let me tell you what it would involve. He explained that his business, Henderson Consulting, helped companies streamline their operations and improve efficiency. He had about 30 employees across 3 offices in different cities, but his main office was here in town. His assistant managed his schedule, handled correspondence, organized meetings, and generally kept his professional life running smoothly. The hours are flexible, Paul said. 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, with the understanding that life happens. If Bella is sick or has a school event, you work around it. The salary is $60,000 a year to start, with benefits including health insurance, dental, vision, and a retirement plan. Catherine's breath caught. $60,000. She'd been making $35,000 at the textile factory, and that had felt like barely enough. This was almost double. The office is downtown, about a 30-minute bus ride from your apartment, Paul continued. Though I should mention there's a company car you can use. My previous assistant didn't drive, so it's just been sitting in the garage. A car? Catherine repeated faintly. Nothing fancy. A 4-year-old sedan. But it's reliable and maintained. Paul leaned forward, his expression earnest. Catherine, I want to be clear about something. I'm not offering you this job out of pity. I'm offering it because I genuinely think you'd be good at it. Yesterday, watching how you handled yourself, your dignity even when things were terrible, your grace under pressure, that showed me character. That's what I need in someone working closely with me. Skills can be taught. Character can't. Catherine's eyes burned with tears. I don't have any experience as an executive assistant. You raised a polite, kind, happy child on your own in difficult circumstances. You managed a household on next to nothing. Those skills translate. Organization, problem-solving, prioritization, those are exactly what the job requires. Paul's voice was gentle. I'll train you in the specifics. The important part is that I trust you. I know that sounds strange since we just met, but I've learned to listen to my instincts about people. And my instincts say you're exactly who I need. Catherine looked over at Bella, absorbed in her books, safe and content. She thought about the groceries in her refrigerator, the job interview that had fallen through last week, the constant weight of worry that had become her normal. This was more than she dared to hope for. More than seemed possible. When would I start? She asked quietly. Paul's face broke into a huge smile. Does that mean you're accepting? Yes. Catherine felt her own smile spreading, unstoppable. Yes, I accept. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. You're doing me the favor, Paul said warmly. My office has been chaos without someone competent running things. Can you start Monday? That gives you a few days to arrange childcare for Bella if needed. There's an after-school program at her school. I could never afford it before, but now. Catherine trailed off, the reality sinking in. She could afford things now. Good childcare, food without constant calculations, maybe even saving a little. They talked for another hour about logistics, about what Catherine would need to prepare, about the office and the team she'd be working with. Paul was patient with her questions, encouraging her to ask anything. When it was time to leave, Paul walked them to the door. "I'll see you Monday morning at 8. The office is in the Preston building downtown, 10th floor. Here's a key card for access." He handed Catherine a small plastic card. She stared at it, this tiny thing that represented a new beginning. "Paul," she said, looking up at him, "I won't let you down. I know you won't." His smile was confident, certain. "Sleep well, Catherine. You both deserve good dreams tonight." On the walk back to the bus stop, Bella chattered happily about the books Paul had let her borrow, about the bird she'd seen through the window, about how nice his house was. "Do you like Paul, Mommy?" she asked as they settled into their seats on the bus. Catherine thought about it. Did she like him? The question felt too simple for the complexity of emotions swirling inside her. Gratitude, certainly. Relief, absolutely. But underneath that, something else. An awareness of him as more than just a benefactor. The warmth in his eyes when he smiled, the gentle way he spoke to Bella, the loneliness she'd glimpsed when he mentioned his late wife. "I do like him," Catherine said finally. "I think he's a very good person." Bella nodded sagely. "Me too. He reminds me of Grandpa. Before Grandpa went to heaven." Catherine's throat tightened. Her father had died when Bella was too young to have many memories. But she remembered kindness, safety, love. If Paul reminded her of that, it spoke volumes. That night, after Bella was asleep, Catherine sat at their small kitchen table with a notepad. She made lists, things she needed to do before Monday, questions she still had about the job, goals she wanted to achieve. But her mind kept drifting back to Paul. To his home filled with memories of a woman he'd loved and lost. To the sadness that lingered behind his smile. To the way he'd looked at her and Bella, like they'd brought something into his life he'd been missing. She wondered about him, this man who had appeared at exactly the right moment. What did he see when he looked at her? Just an employee? A charity case? Or something more? Catherine shook her head at herself. She was being foolish. Paul had given her a job, a chance to rebuild. That was more than enough. She couldn't afford to read anything else into his kindness, to mistake generosity for something deeper. And yet she couldn't help but notice how her heart had lifted when he smiled. How safe she'd felt in his home. How right it had seemed, the three of them around that dinner table. Stop it, she told herself firmly. Focus on the job. On making a good impression. On proving you deserve this chance. But as she climbed into bed that night, she couldn't help smiling into the darkness. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like an enemy to be feared. It felt like a door opening with light spilling through. And Paul Henderson, whether he knew it or not, was the one holding it open. Catherine's first day at Henderson Consulting started with panic. She'd set 3 alarms, terrified of being late, and woke up at 5:30 with her heart racing. By 6, she was dressed in her green dress, her hair neatly pulled back, her mind running through everything Paul had told her about the job. Bella stumbled out of her bedroom at 6:30, rubbing her eyes. "Is it school time already?" "Not yet, baby. I have to leave early for my first day of work. Mrs. Rodriguez is going to take you to school this morning, and then you'll go to the after-school program. I'll pick you up at 5. They'd visited the after-school program on Saturday, and Bella had loved it immediately. Games, crafts, homework help, and snacks. She'd made a friend within 10 minutes, a girl named Sophie who also liked to draw. Catherine made them breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, orange juice poured into plastic cups. Simple but nourishing, made possible by Paul's generosity. "Are you nervous, Mommy?" Bella asked. "A little," Catherine admitted. "But excited too. You're going to be great. Paul thinks so. He told me." Catherine paused, butter knife in midair. "When did he tell you that?" "At dinner when you were in the bathroom. He said you were smart and brave and that he was lucky you said yes to the job." Bella smiled around her toast. "I said you were the best mommy in the whole world and he said he believed it." Catherine's chest tightened with emotion. She finished making breakfast, blinking back tears. By 7:15 she dropped Bella with Mrs. Rodriguez and was waiting at the bus stop. The morning was crisp and cold, her breath forming clouds in the air. But she had a warm coat now, one she'd bought over the weekend with part of the advance Paul had insisted on giving her. The bus ride downtown took 40 minutes in morning traffic. Catherine used the time to review her notes, to mentally prepare herself. She'd never worked in an office before. The textile factory had been loud and industrial, everyone in uniforms, the work physical and repetitive. This would be different. Professional. She hoped she could measure up. The Preston building was a sleek glass and steel structure in the heart of downtown. Catherine showed her key card to security, who directed her to the elevators. The 10th floor opened onto a reception area with the Henderson Consulting logo etched into a glass wall. A young man sat at the front desk, typing on a computer. He looked up when Catherine approached, his face friendly. "Good morning. Can I help you? I'm Catherine Hale. I'm the new executive assistant." His eyes lit up. "Oh, Catherine. Paul said you'd be starting today. I'm Trevor, the receptionist. Welcome to the team." He came around the desk to shake her hand. "Paul's already in his office. Go on back, it's the corner office at the end of the hall." Catherine walked down the corridor, her shoes clicking on the polished floor. Offices lined both sides, some with people already at work, others still dark. Everyone she passed smiled and nodded, creating an atmosphere that felt warm despite the corporate setting. Paul's office door was open. He sat behind a large desk covered in papers and folders, a computer with dual monitors in front of him. When he saw Catherine, his whole face brightened. "Catherine, good morning." He stood, coming around the desk. "How was your first commute?" "Long but fine. I listened to music." "We'll get you set up with the car tomorrow. I meant to do it Friday but got caught up in meetings." Paul gestured to the desk outside his office, positioned so it faced his door. "This is your space. Computer, phone, filing system. Everything you need." The desk was clean and organized, with a new nameplate that read, "Catherine Hale, Executive Assistant." Seeing her name there, official and permanent, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Paul spent the morning walking Catherine through her responsibilities. Managing his calendar, which was a complex puzzle of meetings, calls, and travel. Answering emails and phone calls, screening what needed his immediate attention versus what could wait. Organizing files and documentation for client presentations. Coordinating with the other offices to ensure information flowed smoothly. It was overwhelming at first, the sheer volume of it. But Paul was patient, showing her the systems his previous assistant had used, encouraging her to adapt them to her own style. "There's no one right way to do this," he said. "What matters is that it works for you and keeps me from missing important appointments or losing track of projects." By lunchtime, Catherine's head was spinning. Paul ordered sandwiches from a nearby deli, and they ate in his office while he continued explaining the business. "Most of our clients are mid-sized companies looking to scale up," he said. "They're successful but hitting growth barriers. We analyze their operations, identify inefficiencies, and develop strategies to overcome them. It's problem-solving at its core." "How did you get into this work?" Catherine asked. Paul leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I worked for a big consulting firm right out of college. Spent 10 years there, learned everything I could. But I wanted to do things differently, to focus on really helping clients rather than just maximizing billable hours. So I started my own firm 12 years ago. It was just me and one other consultant at first. Now we have 30 employees and more clients than we can handle." "That's impressive," Catherine said sincerely. "It's been a journey. Especially after Hannah got sick. I almost closed down then, couldn't focus on work when she needed me. But she insisted I keep going, said it gave me purpose beyond being a caretaker." She was right as usual. There was that sadness again, the shadow that crossed his face when he mentioned his wife. Catherine wanted to ask more but didn't feel it was her place. Not yet. The afternoon brought a flurry of activity. Phone calls to return, a client meeting that Paul asked Catherine to sit in on and take notes, emails that needed responses. Catherine worked steadily, learning as she went, occasionally asking Paul for clarification. At 4:30, Paul appeared at her desk. "You should head out. Bella will be waiting." Catherine glanced at the clock, startled. The day had flown by. "Are you sure? There's still work to do." "There's always work to do. But your daughter comes first." Paul's smile was warm. "You did great today, Catherine. Really great. I knew I'd made the right choice." Catherine gathered her things, pride swelling in her chest. She'd done it. She'd survived her first day. More than survived, she'd contributed, she'd learned, she'd proven herself capable. "Thank you, Paul," she said. "For everything. See you tomorrow." Catherine made it to Bella's after-school program with 10 minutes to spare. Bella came running when she saw her, full of stories about her day. They took the bus home, stopped at the corner store for milk, and made dinner together in their small kitchen. That night, as Catherine helped Bella with her homework, her phone buzzed with a text from Paul. "Forgot to mention, there's a company dinner next Friday. Quarterly gathering with all employees. Would love for you to come. Spouses and families welcome, so bring Bella if you'd like." Catherine stared at the message. "A company dinner. With families." She typed back, "We'd love to come. Thank you for including us." The response came immediately, "You're part of the team now. Of course you're included." Part of the team. Catherine had worked at the textile factory for 3 years and never felt like part of anything except the machinery. But after one day at Henderson Consulting, Paul made her feel valued, important, seen. Over the next few days, Catherine fell into a rhythm. Wake early, get Bella ready, commute to work, learn and grow throughout the day, pick up Bella, evening routine, collapse into bed. It was exhausting but fulfilling in a way she'd never experienced. The office culture was unlike anything she'd known. People were friendly and collaborative, stopping by her desk to introduce themselves and offer help. Trevor brought her coffee every morning without being asked. A woman named Ruth from accounting took her to lunch and shared stories about working with Paul. "He's the best boss I've ever had," Ruth said over salads. "Fair, honest, genuinely cares about us as people. When my son was in the hospital last year, Paul paid for a private room and visited twice. That's just who he is." Catherine was beginning to see that. The man who had bought her groceries wasn't an anomaly. That generosity, that kindness, it was woven into everything Paul did. On Thursday, Paul called her into his office. "The car is ready. Want to take a test drive during lunch?" They went down to the building's garage where a silver sedan waited. Paul handed her the keys. "It's yours to use whenever you need it. For work, for personal errands, whatever. Just keep it maintained and filled with gas." Catherine slid behind the wheel, her hands trembling slightly. She'd learned to drive as a teenager but hadn't owned a car in years. The bus had been her only option. "The insurance is through the company," Paul continued. "And there's a gas card in the glove box. Don't worry about the costs, it's all covered as part of your employment package." Catherine started the engine, feeling the smooth rumble of machinery responding to her touch. Freedom, she thought. This is what freedom feels like. They drove around the block, Paul giving her directions, encouraging her to get comfortable with the vehicle. By the time they returned to the garage, Catherine was smiling so widely her face hurt. "Thank you," she said for what felt like the 100th time since meeting Paul. "This makes everything so much easier." "That's the point," Paul said simply. "I want you to succeed, Catherine. And success is easier when you're not fighting basic logistics every step of the way." Friday brought the company dinner. Catherine spent 20 minutes that morning deciding what to wear before settling on a blue dress she'd found at a thrift store, simple but elegant. For Bella, she chose the maroon dress from dinner at Paul's house. The event was held at a nice restaurant downtown, the entire back room reserved for Henderson Consulting. Catherine arrived with Bella, immediately intimidated by the crowd of well-dressed professionals mingling with drinks and appetizers. But Paul found them within minutes, his face lighting up. "Catherine, Bella, I'm so glad you came. Let me introduce you around." He guided them through the room making introductions. His employees were warm and welcoming, several crouching down to talk to Bella at her level, asking about school and her interests. Dinner was served at round tables, and Paul made sure Catherine and Bella were seated at his table along with Ruth, Trevor, and a few senior consultants. The conversation flowed easily, everyone sharing stories and laughing. Catherine watched Paul throughout the evening. How he listened intently when people spoke, how he remembered details about their lives, how he made everyone feel important. He was a natural leader, not because he demanded respect but because he earned it through genuine care. At one point, Paul stood and tapped his glass for attention. The room quieted. "I want to thank everyone for another successful quarter," he began. "Our growth continues to exceed expectations, and that's entirely because of the talented people in this room. You work hard, you care about our clients, and you make me proud every single day." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Catherine. "I also want to introduce our newest team member. Catherine Hale joined us as my executive assistant this week, and I already can't imagine the office without her. She's organized, dedicated, and brings a fresh perspective that's exactly what we needed. Catherine, would you stand?" Catherine's face flushed as she rose, aware of everyone's eyes on her. But the applause was genuine and enthusiastic, people smiling and nodding encouragement. "Thank you," she managed. "I'm grateful to be here." She sat back down, her heart pounding. Bella squeezed her hand under the table, proud and excited. After dinner, as people mingled over dessert, Paul found Catherine on the restaurant's small outdoor patio, where she'd stepped out for some air. "That was quite an introduction," she said. "I wasn't expecting that. You deserved recognition. You've jumped in head first and haven't complained once, even though I know there's a steep learning curve." Paul leaned against the railing beside her. "How are you really doing? Is the job what you expected?" Catherine considered the question. It's more than I expected. Better. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to turn out to be too good to be true. It's not, Paul said quietly. You've earned every bit of it, Catherine. Your position, your salary, the car. None of it is charity. It's compensation for real value you bring to the company. She looked at him, this man who had changed her life in less than 2 weeks. The evening breeze ruffled his hair, and in the soft lighting from the patio lanterns, he looked younger, less burdened. Can I ask you something? Catherine said. Why me? Really? You could have hired someone with experience, someone with references and a resume. Why take a chance on a stranger from a grocery store parking lot? Paul was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but clear. 10 years ago, I was 28 and newly married. My consulting firm was struggling. I'd taken out loans to start it and they were coming due. I had 1 week to make payroll or lose everything. I went to every bank, every investor I could find. They all said no. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. Then I met a woman named Dorothy Parker. She ran a small investment fund from a 2-room office in a strip mall. I almost didn't go to her, figured she couldn't help. But I was desperate. She listened to my pitch, reviewed my business plan and asked about my wife, my goals, my values. Then she wrote me a check for $50,000. Catherine's breath caught. I asked her why she was taking such a risk on me. You know what she said. Paul smiled softly. She said, because I can see your heart and hearts like yours deserve a chance. That money saved my business. 5 years later, I paid her back with interest. But more than that, I promised her I'd do the same for someone else when I could. That I'd look for people with good hearts who just needed a chance. He turned to Catherine, his expression earnest. When I saw you at that store, humiliated and hurting but still standing tall, still fighting for your daughter, I saw that same thing Dorothy saw in me. A good heart. Someone worth betting on. Paul's voice grew thick. Dorothy died 2 years ago. Cancer like Hannah. But her legacy lives on every time I help someone who needs it. So the question isn't why you. It's how could I not? Tears streamed down Catherine's face. She didn't try to hide them. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just keep being who you are. Keep fighting for Bella, keep showing up, keep proving that kindness and hope still matter in this world. Paul reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. That's more than enough. They stood together in comfortable silence, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting from inside the restaurant. Catherine felt something shift inside her, a wall she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. She'd been so focused on survival, on protecting herself and Bella from further hurt, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. To be valued not for what she could produce but for who she was. Paul Henderson saw her. Really saw her. And terrifying as it was, she was beginning to see him too. Not just as her boss or benefactor but as a man. Kind, lonely, generous, scarred by loss but still choosing to open his heart to others. We should get back, Paul said eventually. Bella's probably wondering where you are. Catherine nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you for sharing that story with me. About Dorothy. I'll try to honor her legacy the way you do. You already are, Paul said. Just by being here. They returned to the party together. Bella had made friends with Ruth's daughter and was giggling over some shared joke. Catherine watched her, so happy and carefree, and felt overwhelming gratitude. This was what love looked like. Not romantic love, not yet. But the love of community, of people caring for each other, of second chances and open hands. Paul had given her more than a job. He'd given her hope. And hope, Catherine was learning, was the most powerful gift of all. The evening ended with hugs and goodbyes, promises to see each other Monday. Catherine drove home in her company car, Bella chattering beside her about the fun she'd had. Paul is really nice, isn't he, Mommy? He really is, baby. Do you think he's lonely? In that big house all by himself. Catherine glanced at her daughter, surprised by the perceptiveness. Maybe a little. Why do you ask? He looked sad when everyone was leaving. Like he didn't want them to go. Bella yawned. We should invite him over sometime. So he doesn't have to be alone. Out of the mouths of babes, Catherine thought. That's a sweet idea. Maybe we will. That night, tucked into bed, Catherine thought about Paul's story. About Dorothy Parker and her faith in a young man's heart. About the ripple effects of one person's kindness. She thought about her own journey from that terrible moment outside the grocery store to this, lying in her small apartment with a full refrigerator and a job she loved and a daughter who was thriving. And she thought about Paul, alone in his house, carrying the weight of losses she could only imagine but still choosing every day to be kind, to help, to see the best in people. Her phone buzzed with a text. Hope you and Bella had a good time tonight. Sleep well. Catherine smiled and typed back, we had a wonderful time. Thank you for including us. Sweet dreams. The response came quickly, they will be. You both make everything brighter. Catherine stared at those words, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. She told herself she was reading too much into it, that Paul was just being kind. But part of her, the part that was starting to hope for more than just survival, wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was feeling the same confusing pull she was. Time would tell. For now, she would focus on her job, on being the best assistant Paul could ask for, on proving she deserved this chance. The rest would unfold as it was meant to. And for the first time in years, Catherine found herself looking forward to seeing what came next. The weeks flowed into months, and Catherine settled into her new life with a sense of wonder that never quite faded. Every morning when she woke up in her small apartment, she had to remind herself that this was real. The job, the car, the stability. It wasn't a dream that would evaporate when she opened her eyes. It was November now, and the office had taken on a festive atmosphere as people began talking about holiday plans. Catherine had been at Henderson Consulting for 6 weeks, and it felt like she'd been there forever. The work had become second nature, her efficiency improving with each passing day. Paul was the kind of boss who made work feel less like obligation and more like collaboration. He trusted her judgment, asked for her opinions, and actually listened when she offered suggestions. When she'd proposed a new filing system that would make client information easier to access, he'd implemented it immediately and credited her publicly at the next staff meeting. The other employees had welcomed Catherine warmly. Ruth had become a close friend, often inviting Catherine and Bella over for weekend dinners with her family. Trevor always had a joke or funny story to share, brightening even the most stressful days. The senior consultants treated her with respect, never making her feel less important because her role was administrative rather than client-facing. But it was the small moments with Paul that Catherine found herself treasuring. The way he always asked about Bella first thing in the morning. How he'd started keeping a jar of butterscotch candies on his desk because she'd mentioned once that they were her favorite. The genuine interest he showed in her ideas and perspectives. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Paul called Catherine into his office. She brought her tablet, ready to take notes on whatever project he needed help with. Close the door, he said, his expression serious. Catherine's stomach dropped. In 6 weeks, Paul had never asked her to close the door. Had she made a mistake? Done something wrong? She sat across from his desk, hands folded in her lap, trying to keep her face calm. I need to tell you something, Paul began. And I want you to know that your job is not dependent on your response. Oh no. Catherine's mind raced. Was he about to make an inappropriate advance? Had she misread all his kindness? Paul must have seen the panic in her eyes because he quickly added, It's nothing bad, I promise. Actually, I hope it's good news. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across to her. Catherine opened it, finding legal documents inside. She skimmed the first page, not understanding the legal language. What is this? It's a housing assistance program I've set up through the company, Paul explained. For employees who need help securing better living conditions. Essentially, Henderson Consulting will co-sign on an apartment lease and cover the security deposit and first month's rent. The employee pays rent going forward, but this removes the initial barriers that make it hard to move. Catherine looked up at him, her heart beginning to race for a different reason. Why are you showing me this? Because your building is scheduled for condemnation, Paul said gently. The city inspection report was published online last week. Faulty wiring, plumbing issues, structural concerns. All residents have 60 days to vacate. The room tilted. Catherine gripped the edge of the desk. What? I haven't received any notice. The landlord is supposed to inform everyone this week. I saw the report during a client meeting, a real estate developer mentioned it. I wanted to tell you before you got blindsided. Catherine's mind whirled. 60 days. She'd need to find a new apartment, come up with deposit money, pass a credit check she'd definitely fail, pack and move with a 7-year-old in tow. The stability she'd just found was crumbling already. Hey, Paul said softly. Breathe, Catherine. This is why I set up the program. You qualify. We can start looking at apartments this weekend if you want. Find you a place that's safe and clean in Bella's school district within your budget. I can't afford much, Catherine said, her voice breaking. Even with this job after expenses, I barely save anything. I know. Which is why the company will subsidize the rent for the first year. You'll pay what you can afford, we'll cover the difference. After a year we'll reassess based on your raises and promotions. Catherine stared at him. Promotions? Paul smiled. You don't think you'll be my assistant forever, do you? You're smart, Catherine. Quick learner, natural problem solver. I see management potential. Give it another year and you could be running one of our departments if you wanted. She couldn't speak. Couldn't process what he was offering. It was too much, too generous, too impossibly kind. I don't understand why you keep helping me, she whispered. Paul leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Do you remember at the company dinner when I told you about Dorothy Parker? Catherine nodded. What I didn't tell you was that she had a daughter. A beautiful, bright girl named Sarah who died in a car accident when she was 8 years old. Paul's voice grew thick. Dorothy told me once that the hardest part of losing Sarah was knowing she'd never get to see what her daughter could have become. Never get to watch her grow, achieve, thrive. He paused, looking directly at Catherine. When I see you and Bella, I think about Dorothy and Sarah. About potential cut short, about mothers who fight for their children, about little girls who deserve every chance to become everything they're meant to be. Paul's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Helping you isn't charity, Catherine. It's honoring the people I've loved and lost by making sure their values live on. By making sure that when I see a mother and daughter who need help, I don't walk by. I stop. I reach out. I give them the chance Dorothy gave me. Catherine was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You're a good man, Paul Henderson. I try to be. Some days are easier than others. He pushed a box of tissues across the desk. So what do you say? Can I help you find a better home for you and Bella? Yes, Catherine said through her tears. Yes, please. And thank you. Always thank you. That Saturday, Paul picked up Catherine and Bella in his car, and they spent the day visiting apartments. He'd compiled a list of places in good neighborhoods with reasonable rents, all within Bella's school district. The first 2 were decent but small, not much better than what they currently had. The third was perfect. It was a 2-bedroom apartment in a renovated building with on-site laundry, a small playground out back, and a community room for residents. The unit itself had gleaming hardwood floors, updated appliances, fresh paint and soft cream colors. Large windows let in floods of natural light. The bedrooms were spacious, the bathroom modern, the kitchen had actual counter space. Bella ran from room to room, exclaiming over every feature. Mommy, look. My room has a window seat. And there's a closet big enough for all my clothes and toys. Catherine stood in the middle of the living room, turning in a slow circle. She could picture them here. Bella doing homework at the kitchen table. Weekend mornings making pancakes in that beautiful kitchen. Quiet evenings reading together on a couch that would actually fit in the space. What do you think? Paul asked quietly. It's perfect, Catherine breathed. But the rent is within the program budget. You'd pay $600 a month, the company covers the rest. Lease is for 2 years with an option to renew. $600. Catherine currently paid $550 for a place that was literally being condemned. An extra $50 a month for this beautiful, safe, clean apartment. I want it, she said firmly. We want it. Paul grinned. Then let's go talk to the landlord. The application process was surprisingly simple with Henderson Consulting as co-signer. The landlord, a kind older woman named Mrs. Chin, was delighted to have responsible tenants. They could move in December 1st, just 3 weeks away. That evening, Paul took them to dinner to celebrate. They went to a family restaurant with red vinyl booths and a menu of comfort food. Bella ordered chicken fingers and talked non-stop about decorating her new room. Can I paint it purple, Mommy? Mrs. Chin said we could paint if we wanted to. We'll see, Catherine said, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. Purple is a good choice, Paul said seriously. It's the color of royalty. Perfect for a princess. Bella giggled. I'm not a princess. Are you sure? You seem pretty royal to me. Paul winked at her, and Bella dissolved into laughter. Catherine watched them, something warm and tender expanding in her chest. Paul was so good with Bella, treating her like a person rather than just a kid. He listened to her opinions, asked her questions, made her feel important. Bella had been asking more and more about Paul lately. When would they see him again? Could he come over for dinner? Did he like to play board games? Catherine had been deflecting, not sure how to explain that Paul was her boss, that their relationship was professional, that she couldn't presume on his time outside of work. Except that wasn't quite true anymore, was it? They'd spent multiple weekends together now. Paul had been to her apartment several times, helping with repairs, bringing groceries, just checking in. He called sometimes in the evenings, ostensibly to discuss work but often ending up talking about movies, books, childhood memories. The lines were blurring. Catherine wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere between grocery store and now, Paul had become more than her boss. He was her friend. And if she was honest with herself, she was starting to wish he could be even more than that. But that was dangerous thinking. Paul was her employer. He held her financial security in his hands. Getting involved romantically would be complicated at best, disastrous at worst. And besides, Paul had given no indication he saw her as anything other than an employee he wanted to help. Had he? Catherine thought about the way he looked at her sometimes, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. The way he found excuses to be near her, to touch her shoulder when passing her desk, to lean close when reviewing documents. The way his whole face lit up when she walked into a room. Or maybe she was imagining it, projecting her own growing feelings onto him. Earth to Catherine, Paul said, waving a hand in front of her face. You okay? You zoned out. Sorry? Just thinking about the move. All the packing. I can help with that, Paul offered immediately. I have a truck we can use and I know several employees who'd be happy to pitch in. We'll make a party of it. You've already done so much, Catherine protested. And I'll keep doing it as long as you need help. That's what friends do, Catherine. Friends? The words settled over her, both comforting and frustrating. Yes, they were friends. But Catherine was beginning to want more than friendship, even as she told herself it was impossible. They finished dinner and Paul drove them home. When they pulled up outside Catherine's building, Bella was asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window. I'll carry her up, Paul said, gently lifting Bella into his arms. Catherine unlocked the apartment, turning on lights as Paul carried Bella to her bedroom. He laid her carefully on the bed, and Catherine removed her shoes and covered her with a blanket. Bella murmured something in her sleep and rolled over, not waking. In the living room, Paul lingered near the door. I should get going. Let you rest. Paul, Catherine said, the word coming out before she could think better of it. Why are you really doing all this? He turned to face her fully. I told you. Dorothy's legacy, helping people who need it. It's more than that though, isn't it? The time you spend with us, the personal attention. You could just write a check and call it charity. But you're here in my apartment at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, having spent the entire day helping me apartment hunt and move and build a better life. Catherine took a breath. Why? Paul was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and raw. Because you remind me what it feels like to hope, he said. These past 3 years since Hannah died, I've just been going through the motions. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I was successful but empty. Then I saw you outside that grocery store and something woke up inside me. A reminder that there's still good in the world, still people worth fighting for, still reasons to care. He stepped closer, his brown eyes intense. You and Bella brought light back into my life, Catherine. Every smile, every laugh, every small victory. Watching you grow stronger, more confident. Seeing Bella thrive. Matters to me. You matter to me. Catherine's breath caught. As an employee? As a person, Paul said firmly. As a friend. As someone I care about deeply. He paused, seeming to struggle with something. I know the power dynamic is complicated. I'm your boss, your financial support. I would never want you to feel obligated or pressured. I don't, Catherine said quickly. Paul, everything you've given me I'm grateful for. But that gratitude doesn't define how I feel about you. How do you feel about me? The question was barely a whisper. Catherine's heart pounded. This was it, the moment of truth. She could deflect, keep things professional and safe. Or she could be brave. I think about you all the time, she admitted. Not just as my boss but as a man. A kind, generous, lonely man who deserves to be happy. When I'm with you I feel safe and seen and valued. You make me want to be better, do better. And lately I've been hoping that maybe you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling. Paul closed the remaining distance between them, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. More than a fraction. So much more. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of longing. Catherine's hands came up to grip his shoulders, and she kissed him back, pouring months of suppressed emotion into that single perfect moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Paul rested his forehead against hers. I didn't plan this, he said. Didn't expect to fall for you. But I have, Catherine. Completely. I've fallen for you too, she whispered. I tried not to, told myself it was impossible. But my heart didn't listen. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper. When they finally separated, Paul was smiling, his eyes bright with joy. We should probably talk about this, he said. Figure out what it means for work, for your position. Tomorrow, Catherine said. Tonight, can we just be happy? Tonight, we can be anything you want. They sat together on her worn couch, Catherine curled into Paul's side, his arm around her shoulders. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by kisses and laughter. At midnight, Paul reluctantly pulled away. I should go. Let you sleep. Catherine walked him to the door. Thank you for today. For everything. Thank you for taking a chance on me, Paul said, kissing her forehead. On us. After he left, Catherine stood in her small apartment, touching her lips where he'd kissed her, hardly able to believe what had just happened. She'd come so far from that terrible day at the grocery store. From desperation and despair to this moment of pure joy. She had a job she loved, a beautiful new apartment waiting, and a man who saw her, truly saw her, and wanted to build something real. In her bedroom, Bella slept peacefully, safe and secure. Tomorrow Catherine would start packing for their move. She'd continue excelling at her job. She'd navigate the complexity of dating her boss. But tonight, she would simply savor this feeling. This hope. This love that was just beginning to bloom. Paul had promised to fill her table that first night. He'd done so much more. He'd filled her heart. And Catherine knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. Want to see where this beautiful love story leads? Subscribe now so you don't miss a single moment of Catherine and Paul's journey, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts about their relationship. Do you think they can make it work despite the complications? Moving day arrived on a crisp Saturday morning in early December. Catherine had spent the past 2 weeks packing their belongings into boxes, sorting through years of accumulated items, deciding what to keep and what to let go. True to his word, Paul arrived at 8 a.m. with a moving truck and 6 volunteers from Henderson Consulting. Ruth came with her husband and teenage son. Trevor brought his boyfriend Marcus. 2 of the senior consultants, James and Patricia, showed up with coffee and donuts for everyone. The small apartment filled with people and energy. Within 3 hours, everything Catherine and Bella owned was packed into the truck. Mrs. Rodriguez came out to say goodbye, hugging them both and making Catherine promise to visit. The new apartment was only 15 minutes away, but it felt like moving to a different world. The building was clean and well-maintained, with a cheerful lobby and a front desk attendant who smiled and welcomed them. Mrs. Chin met them with keys and congratulations, exclaiming over how wonderful it would be to have such lovely tenants. Unloading went even faster than packing. Paul had thought of everything: furniture sliders to protect the new floors, tools for assembling Bella's bed, cleaning supplies for a final wipe-down. Everyone worked together with jokes and laughter, transforming the empty apartment into a home. By 2 o'clock, the truck was empty and volunteers were saying their goodbyes. Ruth pulled Catherine aside before leaving. He's different with you, you know, she said quietly, nodding toward Paul, who was helping Bella arrange stuffed animals on her bed. What do you mean? Catherine asked, though her heart already knew. Lighter. Happier. I've worked for Paul for 5 years and I've never seen him smile this much. Whatever is happening between you two, it's good for him. Good for both of you. Ruth hugged her and left. Catherine stood in her new living room, surveying the organized chaos of boxes and furniture, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. Paul emerged from Bella's room, dusting off his hands. I think her royal chamber is complete. She's very specific about where each stuffed animal should sit. She gets that from me, Catherine admitted. I like things just so. I've noticed. Your desk at work is a masterpiece of organization. Paul moved closer, lowering his voice. How are you feeling about all this? Overwhelmed. Grateful. Still half convinced I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. Paul reached out, taking her hand. It's real. You deserve every bit of it. They'd been careful at work, keeping their growing relationship private. Paul didn't want anyone to think he was showing Catherine favoritism because they were involved. Catherine didn't want colleagues to believe she'd used her relationship to advance her position. But in private moments like this, when it was just them, the connection was undeniable. Stay for dinner? Catherine asked. I don't have much to cook with yet, but I could order pizza. Mommy, can Paul stay? Bella called from her bedroom. I want to show him my room when it's all done. Paul laughed. Looks like I'm outvoted. Pizza sounds perfect. They spent the evening unpacking essentials and ordering food. Chinese, not pizza, after Bella changed her mind 3 times. They ate sitting on the floor of the living room, using paper plates because the dishes were still packed. This is the best moving day ever, Bella declared, sweet and sour sauce on her chin. Later, after Bella was in bed, Catherine and Paul sat together on the couch, exhausted but content. Thank you for today, Catherine said. For organizing everything, for being here. I couldn't have done this without you. You absolutely could have. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Paul traced circles on the back of her hand with his thumb. But I'm glad I got to help. Glad I get to be part of your life. Part of my life, Catherine repeated softly. Is that what we're calling this? What would you like to call it? Catherine considered. They'd been dating, if you could call their careful interactions that, for 3 weeks now. Stolen kisses in Paul's office when everyone else had left. Long phone calls after Bella was asleep. Dinners together disguised as work meetings. I want to call it real, she said finally. I want to call you my boyfriend, as old-fashioned as that sounds. I want Bella to know that you're important to me, to us. Paul's eyes softened. I want that too. All of it. But I want to make sure you're ready. That you're not feeling pressured because of our work relationship. Paul, look at me. Catherine waited until his eyes met hers. I chose you. Not the job, not the apartment, not the security. I chose you because of who you are. Kind, generous, funny, thoughtful. You see me, really see me, and you make me want to be brave enough to see you back. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, his hands tangling in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Paul rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, Catherine Hale. Actually, that's a lie. I've already fallen. I'm just waiting for you to catch up. Joy burst through Catherine's chest like fireworks. Then you won't have to wait long. Because I'm already there too. They held each other on the couch, talking and kissing until midnight. When Paul finally left, Catherine locked the door behind him and leaned against it, smiling so wide her face hurt. This was happiness. Real, genuine, almost frightening in its intensity. After so many years of just surviving, Catherine was finally learning to thrive. The next few weeks settled into a comfortable pattern. Catherine excelled at work, her confidence growing with each successful project. Paul relied on her more and more, not just for administrative tasks but for strategic input. She had a good mind for business, it turned out, and could spot inefficiencies and opportunities that others missed. In early January, Paul promoted her to office manager, with a raise and expanded responsibilities. She would oversee the administrative staff, manage office operations, and assist with client relations. It was a significant step up, one that came with respect from colleagues who saw how hard she worked. At home, Bella thrived. Her grades improved now that she had a quiet space to study. She made friends in the building, kids who played together in the courtyard after school. She started taking art classes at the community center, bringing home colorful paintings that Catherine proudly displayed on the refrigerator. And her relationship with Paul deepened. They were careful in public, maintaining professional boundaries at the office. But evenings and weekends were theirs. Paul came over for dinner several times a week. They took Bella to museums, parks, movies. They went on dates, just the two of them, when Ruth offered to babysit. Bella adored Paul, and the feeling was clearly mutual. He attended her school art show, cheering louder than anyone when she won an honorable mention. He helped with her math homework, using the puzzle approach he'd mentioned that first night to make it fun. He remembered little things like her favorite ice cream flavor and which stuffed animal she slept with every night. One February evening, after Bella was in bed, Paul and Catherine sat together on the couch, Catherine's head on his shoulder. I've been thinking about something, Paul said quietly. What's that? Moving forward. With us. Making this official in a way that's not just private. Catherine sat up, looking at him. What do you mean? I mean telling people at work. Not making a big announcement but not hiding anymore either. Paul took her hand. You've proven yourself 100 times over. Your promotion had nothing to do with our relationship and everything to do with your skills. I don't think anyone would question that. Catherine bit her lip. What if they do though? What if people think I'm sleeping my way to success? Then they're idiots who don't know you at all, Paul said firmly. Catherine, I understand the fear. But living in secret, pretending you're just my employee when you're so much more, it's getting harder. I want to be able to put my arm around you at company events. I want to tell people about the brilliant woman I'm dating. I want to stop hiding how happy you make me. I want that too, Catherine admitted. It's just scary. I know. But we'll face it together. Paul cupped her face gently. What do you say? Can we be brave? Catherine thought about it. About Ruth's knowing looks, about Trevor's subtle questions, about the way other employees watched her and Paul interact. Some probably already suspected. Maybe it was time to just be honest. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Let's tell people. They started small. Paul mentioned to Ruth during a casual conversation that he was seeing someone. When she asked who, he told her the truth. Ruth's reaction was pure joy. "I knew it," she said, grinning. "I'm so happy for you both." Word spread quickly, as it does in any office. But the response was overwhelmingly positive. People liked Catherine, respected her work ethic, and could see how good she and Paul were together. A few raised eyebrows here and there, some whispered conversations, but nothing that felt hostile or judgmental. The company's HR director, a practical woman named Susan, called them both in for a meeting. Catherine's stomach churned with anxiety, but Susan just wanted to ensure they understood the policies around workplace relationships and were both comfortable with the situation. "No one is suggesting you end the relationship," Susan said clearly. "But I need to know that Catherine feels free to continue her employment regardless of the relationship status. That there's no coercion or pressure." "There isn't," Catherine said firmly. "Paul and I started dating after I was hired, after I'd proven myself in the role. If our relationship ended tomorrow, I would still want to work at Henderson Consulting. I love my job independent of my feelings for Paul." Susan nodded, satisfied. "And Paul, you understand that Catherine's future promotions and raises need to be based solely on merit and approved by me and the senior partners, not just your decision?" "Absolutely," Paul agreed. With that official blessing, Catherine and Paul relaxed into their relationship. They had dinner together most nights, alternating between Paul's house and Catherine's apartment. They took weekend trips to nearby cities, exploring museums and restaurants with Bella in tow. They built a life together, piece by piece, day by day. In March, Bella asked the question Catherine had been both anticipating and dreading. "Mommy, is Paul your boyfriend?" They were making dinner together, just the two of them, while Paul worked late at the office. Catherine paused in chopping vegetables. "Yes, sweetheart. He is. How do you feel about that?" Bella considered this seriously. "I think it's good. He makes you smile a lot. And he's nice to me." "He is very nice to you. Do you like having him around?" "Yeah, he's fun. And he doesn't treat me like a baby." Bella paused. "Does this mean he might be here all the time? Like living here?" Catherine's heart skipped. She and Paul hadn't discussed that yet. "Would you want that?" "Maybe. Can I think about it?" "Of course you can, baby. This is your home too. Any big decisions we make together." That night, after Bella was asleep, Catherine called Paul. "Bella asked if you're my boyfriend today." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you are, and that I care about you a lot." She took it well. Catherine paused. "She also asked if you might live with us someday." Paul was quiet for a moment. "What did you say to that?" "That she could think about how she'd feel about it." "But Paul, we haven't even discussed that. I don't want to move too fast." "We're not," Paul assured her. "We've been together 5 months. We're taking our time building something real. Whenever we're ready to talk about next steps, we will. There's no rush." But Catherine could hear the hope in his voice, the same hope that was blooming in her own chest. The idea of waking up next to Paul every morning, of building a family together, of making their relationship permanent and official. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Over the next few months, their relationship continued to deepen. Paul met Catherine's sister during a video call, charming her immediately with his genuine interest in her life. Catherine met Paul's parents when they visited from Florida, and they adored her, especially the way she made their son happy again. Work remained fulfilling. Catherine discovered she had a talent for managing people, for creating systems that helped the office run smoothly. Paul continued to expand her responsibilities, preparing her for even bigger roles in the future. In May, on Catherine's birthday, Paul took her to dinner at an upscale restaurant. They'd left Bella with Ruth for the evening, one of their rare dates alone. Over dessert, Paul reached across the table and took her hand. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Catherine's breath caught. It was too small to be a ring box, but still her heart raced. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small heart pendant, a tiny diamond glittering at its center. "Paul, it's beautiful," she breathed. "The heart represents what you've given back to me," he said softly. "The ability to love again, to hope again, to imagine a future filled with joy instead of just obligation." He fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle. "Thank you, Catherine. For choosing me. For being patient while I figured out how to choose you back." Catherine turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Paul Henderson. Completely. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible." They kissed across the table, oblivious to the other diners, lost in their own perfect moment. Driving home, Catherine touched the necklace, feeling its weight against her skin. A reminder that love was real, that second chances existed, that sometimes the darkest moments led to the brightest futures. She thought about that day at the grocery store, standing with an empty basket and a breaking heart. If someone had told her then that within a year she'd have a career she loved, a beautiful home, and a man who adored her, she would never have believed it. But here she was, living proof that kindness could change everything. That one person's generosity could ripple out in ways no one could predict. Paul had filled her table that first night, just as he'd promised. But he'd done so much more. He'd filled her life with possibility, her heart with love, and her future with hope. Anne Catherine knew with absolute certainty that the best was yet to come. Summer arrived with bright sunshine and warm breezes, and with it came changes at Henderson Consulting. The company had secured 3 major new clients, expanding their reach into industries they'd never worked with before. Paul was traveling more frequently, meeting with executives across the country, building relationships that would fuel years of growth. Catherine managed the office in his absence, her confidence fully established now. The administrative staff looked to her for guidance and decisions. She'd implemented new systems that improved efficiency by 20%, earning praise from the senior partners. Her role had evolved beyond just supporting Paul into genuine leadership. On a Tuesday in late June, Paul returned from a business trip to New York looking exhausted but pleased. Catherine had arranged his schedule to give him a light day for recovery, just a few internal meetings and time to catch up on emails. "You're a lifesaver," he said, sinking into his office chair. "I don't know how I functioned before you." "Probably not very well," Catherine teased, bringing him coffee the way he liked it. That evening they had dinner plans with some of Paul's longtime friends, a couple named Richard and Sophie Martinez who were visiting from Chicago. Paul had known them since college and he was excited for Catherine to meet them. The restaurant was elegant, the kind with cloth napkins and multiple forks. Catherine wore a blue dress that Paul had bought her for her birthday, simple but sophisticated. She'd come a long way from the woman in the worn jacket outside the grocery store. Richard and Sophie were warm and friendly, immediately putting Catherine at ease. Richard ran a tech startup while Sophie worked as a marketing executive. They'd been married for 15 years and had 2 teenage children. "Paul talks about you constantly," Sophie said with a knowing smile. "Catherine this, Catherine that. It's wonderful to finally meet the woman who brought him back to life." Catherine blushed. "He exaggerates." "Actually, he doesn't," Richard interjected. "We've known Paul for 20 years. After Hannah died, he retreated into himself. We worried about him, tried to get him to date, to engage with life again. Nothing worked. Then suddenly, about 6 months ago, he calls us sounding happy. Really happy. Said he'd met someone special." Paul reached under the table and squeezed Catherine's hand. "I did meet someone special." Dinner conversation flowed easily. They talked about business, travel, families. Catherine shared stories about Bella, and Sophie showed pictures of her own children. Richard and Paul reminisced about college adventures, making everyone laugh with their ridiculous antics. Then, as dessert arrived, Sophie asked the question that changed everything. "So Catherine, how does it feel working for a billionaire? Does Paul make you count his money or something?" Catherine laughed, assuming it was a joke. "Paul's successful, but I don't think billionaire is quite accurate." The table went quiet. Sophie's eyes widened. Richard cleared his throat awkwardly. Paul's face went carefully blank. "Catherine," Sophie said slowly, "you do know about Henderson Holdings, right? The parent company that owns Henderson Consulting and about 40 other businesses." Catherine's stomach dropped. She looked at Paul. "What is she talking about?" Paul set down his fork carefully. "Can we discuss this later? In private?" "No," Catherine said, her voice sharper than intended. "I want to understand. What is Henderson Holdings?" Richard and Sophie exchanged uncomfortable looks. Sophie spoke gently. "Henderson Holdings is Paul's investment company. It owns or has significant shares in businesses across multiple sectors. Real estate development, technology consulting, manufacturing, retail. The company is valued at over $2 billion. The room spun. Catherine gripped the edge of the table. $2 billion. "Catherine," Paul started, but she held up a hand. "You told me you ran a consulting business," she said, her voice shaking. "You said you helped companies improve their operations. You never mentioned owning dozens of businesses. You never said anything about being a billionaire." "I didn't lie," Paul said quietly. "I do run a consulting business. That's what I spend most of my time on because it's the work I love. The other investments are managed by professionals. I'm rarely involved in day-to-day operations." "But you let me believe," Catherine's voice broke, "you let me think you were just a successful consultant. Not someone worth billions of dollars." Not someone who could buy my entire apartment building without blinking. I didn't want money to define how you saw me, Paul said, his eyes pleading. When we met, you were vulnerable, desperate. If you'd known how wealthy I was, it would have changed everything. Every kindness would have felt like a billionaire throwing scraps. Every gesture would have seemed calculated. So instead you lied by omission? Catherine stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me. I need air. She fled the restaurant, pushing through the front doors into the warm night. Her breath came in short gasps, her mind reeling. $2 billion. Paul was worth $2 billion and he'd never said a word. Paul followed her outside. Catherine, please. Let me explain. Explain what? That you've been hiding who you really are this entire time? That every moment I've spent worrying about being a burden, you could have bought me a house without noticing the expense. Tears streamed down her face. I thought we were equals, Paul. I thought we were building something real based on honesty. We are, Paul insisted. My wealth doesn't change who I am. I'm still the same person who bought you groceries, who helped you move, who fell in love with you and Bella. But it does change things, Catherine said. Don't you see? I've been so grateful for every little thing you've done, so careful not to ask for too much, so worried about taking advantage of your generosity. And the whole time what you've given me is less than pocket change to you. That's not fair, Paul said, his voice hardening. The money I spent helping you was a choice, something I wanted to do because I cared about you. Not because it was easy or convenient, but because watching you struggle broke my heart. Would you have preferred I did nothing? Just walked away and let you and Bella go hungry? I would have preferred honesty, Catherine shot back. I would have preferred knowing who you really were so I could make informed decisions about our relationship. They stood facing each other on the sidewalk, both breathing hard. Inside the restaurant, Catherine could see Richard and Sophie watching through the window, their faces worried. You're right, Paul said finally, his shoulders sagging. I should have told you. I meant to so many times. But I was afraid. Afraid that knowing about the money would change how you saw me. That you'd start seeing dollar signs instead of just Paul. You didn't give me a chance to prove I'm better than that, Catherine said quietly. I know. I'm sorry. Paul's voice was raw. Catherine, I've been wealthy for a long time. And I've learned that money changes how people act around you. They either want something from you or resent you for having it. When I met you, you didn't know about any of it. You saw me, just me. It was the most real connection I'd had in years. Catherine wiped her tears, trying to calm down and think clearly. I understand that. I do. But we're supposed to be partners, Paul. Partners don't keep massive secrets from each other. You're right. Absolutely right. Paul took a cautious step closer. I should have told you months ago. I kept finding reasons to wait, telling myself the timing wasn't right. That was cowardly. I'm sorry. Catherine looked at this man she'd fallen in love with, seeing him in a new light. Still kind, still generous, but also human and flawed, carrying his own fears and insecurities. Is there anything else? She asked. Any other massive revelations I should know about? No. I promise. That's it. Paul met her eyes. I'm a man who loves you and Bella, who wants to build a life with you, who happens to have more money than he knows what to do with. That's the whole truth. Catherine took a deep breath. I need some time to process this. It's a lot. Of course. Take all the time you need. Paul's expression was devastated. Are we okay? Are we going to be okay? I don't know yet, Catherine said honestly. I love you, Paul. That hasn't changed. But I feel like I don't fully know who you are, and that scares me. I'm still the same person you've known for the past 8 months, Paul said desperately. The money doesn't change that. Doesn't it though? Catherine shook her head. I need to go home. Tell Richard and Sophie I'm sorry for ruining dinner. Let me drive you. No. I need to be alone right now. Catherine pulled out her phone to call a car service. Paul looked like he wanted to argue but didn't. Will you call me? When you're ready to talk. Yes, I will. I just need time. The car arrived and Catherine got in, leaving Paul standing on the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets, looking more alone than she'd ever seen him. On the drive home, Catherine's mind raced. $2 billion. It was an incomprehensible amount of money. More than she could earn in 100 lifetimes. And Paul had it, controlled it, used it to reshape the world around him. Including her world. Her apartment, her job, her car, her financial security. All of it came from Paul's vast wealth. She'd thought she was building independence, proving her own worth. But was any of it real if it was all funded by a billionaire? At home, after paying the babysitter and checking on Bella, Catherine sat in her living room with the lights off, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from Paul, apologizing, asking if she was okay, saying he loved her. She couldn't respond yet. Couldn't sort through the tangle of emotions. Finally, she called the one person she knew would give her straight advice. Her sister Nicole. It was late, but Nicole answered on the second ring. Catherine? What's wrong? I need to talk. And Catherine told her everything. The grocery store, the job, the relationship, tonight's revelation. When she finished, Nicole was quiet for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. I'm going to ask you some hard questions and I need you to really think about the answers. Okay. First question. Has Paul ever made you feel less than because you needed help? Catherine thought about it. No. Never. Has he ever held his money or generosity over your head? Used it to control you or make demands? No. Does he treat you as an equal in your relationship? Listen to your opinions, respect your decisions, value your input? Yes. Always. And most importantly, Nicole said, her voice gentle. Do you love him? Not what he can provide, but him as a person. Tears streamed down Catherine's face. Yes. So much. Then here's what I think, Nicole said. Paul made a mistake not telling you about his wealth sooner. That's true. But his reasons, protecting what you had together from the complications money brings, I can understand that. The question isn't whether he has billions. It's whether he's the same man you fell in love with. Is he? Catherine closed her eyes, thinking about Paul. His kindness with Bella, his patience teaching her the job, his vulnerability when talking about Hannah. The way he laughed at bad jokes and cried during sad movies. How he always asked about her day and really listened to the answer. Yes, she whispered. He's the same man. Then don't let pride destroy something good, Nicole advised. I know it's a shock. I know it changes how you see things. But if the core of who he is hasn't changed, if he still treats you well and loves you genuinely, then the number in his bank account shouldn't matter. They talked for another hour, Nicole helping Catherine work through her feelings. By the time they hung up, Catherine felt clearer, calmer. She picked up her phone and texted Paul, "Can you come over tomorrow evening? We need to talk." The response came immediately, "I'll be there. Thank you for giving me a chance to make this right." Catherine went to bed but couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Paul's face when she'd left him on the sidewalk, the devastation in his eyes. He made a mistake, yes. But he'd done it out of fear, not malice. And wasn't she guilty of the same thing? Hiding her own fears and insecurities, presenting the version of herself she thought Paul wanted to see? Real relationships required vulnerability. It required trusting someone with the messy, complicated truth of who you were. Paul had failed at that tonight, but he was trying. And Catherine needed to try too. The next evening, Paul arrived at 7, looking nervous and exhausted. Catherine let him in, gestured to the couch. "Bella's at a friend's house for a sleepover," she said. "We can talk freely." Paul sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. "Catherine, I am so sorry. You were right, I should have told you. I was selfish and scared and I hurt you because of it. That's inexcusable." Catherine sat across from him in the armchair, maintaining some distance while she organized her thoughts. "You did hurt me," she said. "Not because of the money itself, but because you didn't trust me with the truth. You made that choice for both of us, deciding I couldn't handle knowing who you really were." "I was wrong," Paul said simply. "Completely wrong." "You were," Catherine agreed. "But I've been thinking about why you did it and I understand the fear. Money does change things. I've seen it already in how people at the office sometimes treat me differently once they knew we were dating. I imagine it's 1,000 times worse when you're talking about billions." She leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "But Paul, if we're going to have any kind of future together, we have to trust each other completely. No more secrets, no more protecting each other from difficult truths. We're partners and partners don't hide things." "You're right. Absolutely right." Paul's voice was thick with emotion. "I promise complete honesty from now on. About everything. I need to know about your life," Catherine continued. "The businesses, the investments, what your world really looks like. Not because I want access to your money, but because I want to understand who you are fully." "I'll tell you anything you want to know," Paul said eagerly. "Every detail, every number. I'll show you exactly what my financial situation is so there are no more surprises." Catherine nodded. "And I need you to understand something too. I fell in love with you before I knew about any of this. The man who bought me groceries, who helped me find an apartment, who plays board games with my daughter and listens to her endless stories about school. That's the Paul, the first love. The billions don't change that." Paul's face crumpled with relief. "You still love me?" Of course I still love you, Catherine said, her own tears flowing now. I was hurt and shocked and confused, but that didn't erase 8 months of building something real together. You're still you, Paul. Just you with a much larger bank account than I realized. Paul crossed the space between them, kneeling in front of her chair and taking her hands. I love you so much, Catherine. You and Bella, you're my family. You're what matters, not the money or the businesses or any of it. Without you, it's all just numbers on a page. Catherine cupped his face in her hands. Then help me understand your world. Teach me about what you do, who you are when you're managing all these companies. Don't hide parts of yourself because you're afraid I'll judge you. I won't, Paul promised. Starting now, complete transparency. They talked late into the night. Paul explained Henderson Holdings, how he'd built it over 15 years through smart investments and strategic acquisitions. He showed her financial statements on his phone, helping her understand the scope of his wealth and how it was managed. Most of it is tied up in the businesses, he explained. I don't have $2 billion sitting in a bank account. But my net worth, the value of everything I own, it's in that range. And the consulting business? Catherine asked. That's my passion project. It doesn't generate the most revenue compared to my other holdings, but it's the work I love most. Helping companies solve problems, that's what energizes me. Paul smiled softly. Everything else, the investments and holdings, those are just means to an end. Ways to ensure financial security so I can focus on the work that matters. Catherine absorbed this new information, fitting it into her understanding of who Paul was. What about charity? Do you give a lot away? About 30% of annual profits go to various foundations and causes. Education, medical research, poverty relief. I've been doing it quietly for years. Why quietly? Paul shrugged. Because the point isn't recognition. It's helping. Though I've been thinking lately about being more public with it, using my platform to encourage others to give. They talked until midnight, Paul answering every question Catherine had. By the end, she felt like she finally knew the complete picture of the man she loved. Can I stay? Paul asked quietly. Just hold you while we sleep? I've missed you so much the past 2 days. Catherine nodded and they moved to her bedroom. They lay together in the dark, Paul's arms around her, both finding comfort in the closeness. I'm sorry I wasn't honest from the beginning, Paul whispered into her hair. I'm sorry I ran away instead of staying to work through it, Catherine replied. We're learning, Paul said. Learning how to be together, how to navigate the complicated parts. That's okay. As long as we keep choosing each other. I'll always choose you, Catherine promised. And as she drifted off to sleep, safe in Paul's arms, Catherine realized something important. The money didn't matter. Not really. What mattered was the heart of the man holding her, the kindness he showed to strangers, the love he gave so freely. Paul Henderson the billionaire was impressive. But Paul Henderson the man was extraordinary. And he was hers. The rest of the summer passed in a blur of happiness. True to his word, Paul opened his life completely to Catherine. He took her to board meetings for Henderson Holdings, introduced her to the investment managers who handled his portfolio, explained the intricate web of businesses he owned or had stakes in. Catherine discovered that Paul's wealth, while vast, wasn't frivolous. Every investment served a purpose, creating jobs, advancing technology, supporting sustainable business practices. He wasn't just accumulating money. He was trying to make a positive impact on the world. She also met more of his world. Business associates, fellow investors, philanthropists. Some were kind and welcoming. Others looked at Catherine with barely concealed judgment, seeing a single mother who'd lucked into a billionaire's affection. She learned to ignore the whispers, to hold her head high, to remember that Paul chose her for who she was, not what she had. At work, Catherine's role continued to expand. Paul began bringing her to client meetings, valuing her fresh perspective. Her insights, unburdened by years of consulting jargon, often cut straight to the heart of issues that others missed. Clients appreciated her direct communication style and problem-solving approach. By August, Paul promoted her again, this time to Director of Operations. It was a significant role with real authority, managing not just the office but coordinating across the company's 3 locations. The salary that came with it, $90,000 a year, made Catherine's head spin. She'd gone from making $35,000 at the factory to this in just 10 months. You've earned every penny, Paul insisted when she expressed concern about moving up too quickly. This isn't favoritism, Catherine. The senior partners all agreed you were the right person for this role. You've proven yourself again and again. At home, Bella thrived. She'd grown 2 inches over the summer, her artistic skills blossoming. She asked for piano lessons and Catherine enrolled her immediately, no longer having to calculate whether they could afford it. Watching Bella sit at the keyboard, concentrating intensely on learning a new song, Catherine felt overwhelming gratitude for how far they'd come. Sunday dinners had become tradition. Sometimes they were at Catherine's apartment, sometimes at Paul's house. Often they included Ruth's family or other friends from the office. Paul was teaching Catherine and Bella to cook, sharing recipes Hannah had loved. One Sunday in September, after a meal of homemade lasagna, Bella asked the question they'd both been waiting for. "Paul, are you going to marry my mommy?" Catherine nearly dropped the plate she was washing. Paul, sitting at the kitchen table helping Bella with a puzzle, went very still. "Bella," Catherine started, but Paul held up a hand. "It's okay." He turned to Bella, his expression serious. "Would you like me to marry your mommy?" Bella considered this carefully. "Would that mean you'd be my daddy?" "It would mean I'd be your stepfather. Which is like a daddy, someone who loves you and takes care of you and wants to be part of your family. Your biological father will always be your father, even though he's not in your life right now. But I could be an additional parent if you'd want that." Bella's biological father had left before she was born, a college boyfriend who'd made it clear he wanted no part of parenthood. Catherine had raised Bella alone from the beginning, and Bella had no memory of ever having a father figure until Paul. "I would like that," Bella said softly. "You already feel like a daddy. You come to my school stuff and help with homework and make mommy happy. If you married her, could I call you dad?" Paul's eyes went bright with tears. "I would be honored if you called me dad." Bella launched herself at Paul, hugging him tight. Over her head, Paul met Catherine's eyes. The look they shared was full of promise and possibility. That night, after Bella was asleep, Catherine and Paul sat together on the couch. "We should probably talk about that conversation," Catherine said. "Probably," Paul agreed. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said to Bella. I'd be honored to be her stepfather. She already loves you like a father. The title would just make it official." Paul took Catherine's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I want to marry you, Catherine. I've wanted it for months. But I didn't want to rush you, didn't want you to feel pressured because of everything I've given you." "I don't feel pressured," Catherine said. "I feel loved. And I want to marry you too." Paul's face broke into a huge smile. "Really? Really? You've become essential to my life, to Bella's life. I can't imagine a future without you in it." "I'm going to do this properly," Paul said, standing up and pulling Catherine to her feet. "With a ring and a romantic proposal and everything you deserve. But I need you to know, right now, that I'm completely committed to building a life with you and Bella. You're my family. The most important thing in my world." Catherine kissed him, pouring 8 months of love and trust and hope into it. "We're your family," she agreed. "And you're ours." 3 weeks later, on a sunny October afternoon, Paul took Catherine to the botanical gardens where they'd had one of their first dates. They walked through the autumn displays, Bella running ahead to look at the colorful leaves, giving them a moment of privacy. In a secluded gazebo surrounded by chrysanthemums, Paul got down on one knee. "Catherine Hale, you walked into my life when I'd given up on finding joy again. You reminded me that love is possible after loss, that families can be built from kindness and choice, that every day is a chance to start over and do better." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a beautiful diamond ring, elegant and classic. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and Bella and building a future together?" "Yes," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." Paul slipped the ring on her finger, then stood and kissed her thoroughly. Bella, who'd been hiding nearby with a camera to capture the moment, came running up. "She said yes," she shouted joyfully. "We're going to be a real family." Paul scooped Bella up, spinning her around. "We already are a real family. This just makes it official." That evening they celebrated with friends and colleagues at Paul's house. Ruth cried happy tears. Trevor made a speech about true love. The senior partners from Henderson Consulting raised glasses to the couple's happiness. Later, as guests mingled and laughed, Catherine stood on Paul's back deck, looking at the ring on her finger in wonder. "It's beautiful," Ruth said, joining her. "Everything about this is beautiful. You and Paul, you're perfect together." "I keep thinking about that day at the grocery store," Catherine admitted. "How desperate and hopeless I felt. If someone had told me that the stranger who appeared would become my husband, I would have thought they were crazy." "God works in mysterious ways," Ruth said. "Or the universe or fate, whatever you believe in. The important thing is you were both brave enough to take a chance on each other." Inside, Catherine could see Paul and Bella heads together over something on his phone, both laughing. Her family. Chosen and cherished and so impossibly precious. When's the wedding? Ruth asked. We haven't decided yet. Probably spring. Nothing too big, just the people who matter most to us. Wherever and whenever it is, I'll be there, Ruth promised. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning. Catherine and Paul decided on a small ceremony in the botanical gardens, the same place he'd proposed. Just 50 guests, intimate and meaningful. Bella insisted on being involved in every decision. She picked purple flowers for the bouquets, chose the cake flavors, helped Catherine find the perfect blue dress. For Bella herself, they found a beautiful purple gown that made her feel like the princess Paul always said she was. At work, Catherine continued to excel. She'd found her calling in business operations, discovering skills she never knew she had. Paul had been right that first day. She was capable of so much more than she'd ever imagined. In December, Henderson Consulting was approached by a major corporation for a possible acquisition. They wanted to buy the consulting business, offering a sum that would triple Paul's already vast wealth. Paul brought Catherine into the discussions, valuing her opinion. What do you think I should do? He asked one evening as they reviewed the offer. That depends, Catherine said. What do you want to do? Part of me is tempted. The money would allow me to expand my charitable work exponentially. But this business, it's my passion. I love the work, love the team we've built. Then don't sell, Catherine said simply. You have more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. What you don't have is another passion project that brings you this much joy. Paul smiled. You're right. I'm going to turn them down. Good. They'll maybe ask if they'd consider a partnership instead? You keep running the business, they invest in expansion. Paul's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Because you've been too close to it, Catherine said. Sometimes you need fresh eyes. The partnership ended up working out perfectly. The corporation invested $50 million to expand Henderson Consulting into international markets, while Paul retained complete control of operations. It was the best of both worlds. As their wedding day approached, Catherine found herself marveling at how much her life had changed. A year ago, she'd been struggling to feed her daughter. Now she was planning a wedding to a man who loved her deeply, thriving in a career she was passionate about, watching her daughter flourish in ways she'd only dreamed of. One February evening, a month before the wedding, Catherine sat with Paul and Bella at their kitchen table, helping Bella with her homework. Mommy, Bella said suddenly. Are you happy? Catherine looked at her daughter, then at Paul, then around at the life they'd built together. I'm more than happy, baby. I'm grateful. I'm blessed. I'm loved. Me too, Bella said, returning to her math problems. Paul reached across the table and squeezed Catherine's hand. Me too. And in that simple moment, Catherine understood something profound. Happiness wasn't about money or security or even love, though all those things helped. Happiness was about belonging, about finding your people and building a life with them one day at a time. She'd found her people. Paul and Bella, Ruth and Trevor, the community they'd created at Henderson Consulting. They were her family, chosen and cherished. Everything that came before, the struggles and pain and fear, it had all led her here. To this table, this moment, this perfect imperfect life. And she wouldn't change a single thing. March arrived with unexpected warmth and the promise of new beginnings. Catherine's wedding was 3 weeks away, and she felt like she was floating through her days in a haze of happiness. The dress hung in her closet, alterations complete. The venue was confirmed, flowers ordered, caterer finalized. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Then, on a Tuesday morning, everything fell apart. Catherine arrived at the office to find Paul already there, his face grim as he stared at his computer screen. Several of the senior consultants were gathered in his office, their expressions equally troubled. What's wrong? Catherine asked, setting down her coffee. Paul looked up and she saw real worry in his eyes. We have a problem. A big one. He explained quickly. Dawson Industries, their largest client, accounting for nearly 30% of Henderson Consulting's revenue, had sent an email at 6 that morning terminating their contract effective immediately. Immediately? Catherine repeated. They can't do that. We have a 3-month termination clause in the contract. They're invoking the ethics violation provision, James, one of the senior partners, said grimly. Claims we've been engaging in fraudulent billing practices. Catherine's stomach dropped. That's insane. We've never done anything like that. We know, Paul said. But they have documentation. Emails, billing records, all allegedly showing that we've been padding hours and charging for services never rendered. Let me see, Catherine demanded, coming around the desk. Paul pulled up the emails. They appeared to be from Henderson Consulting's billing department, detailing hours worked on Dawson projects. But as Catherine studied them, something felt off. These email addresses are wrong, she said, pointing. Look at the domain. It's henderson-consulting.com, with a hyphen. Our actual domain is hendersonconsulting.com, without the hyphen. Someone created a fake domain to send these. The room went silent. Paul leaned in, verifying what Catherine had spotted. She's right. These are forgeries. Who would do this? Patricia, another senior partner, asked. Paul's face darkened. I have an idea. He explained that 6 months ago, he'd fired a consultant named Martin Shore for unethical practices. Martin had been padding his own hours, billing clients for work his junior consultants had done, and pocketing the difference. When Paul discovered it, he terminated Martin immediately and reported him to the consulting industry's ethics board. Martin swore he'd get revenge, Paul said. I didn't take it seriously at the time. Figured he was just angry and would move on. Apparently he hasn't moved on, James said grimly. Catherine's mind was racing. Okay, we can prove the emails are fake. But in the meantime, Dawson has terminated the contract. Even if we prove our innocence, getting them back could take months. And if word spreads that we're under investigation for fraud, other clients might panic and leave too. Exactly, Paul said, running a hand through his hair. This could destroy the business. Not if we move quickly, Catherine said, her voice firm. She turned to her computer, pulling up her client files. Give me an hour. I need to make some calls. For the next week, Catherine worked 18-hour days, managing the crisis with a skill that surprised even her. She reached out to every client personally, explaining the situation before rumors could spread. She coordinated with the company's lawyers to gather evidence proving the emails were fraudulent. She worked with the IT department to trace the fake domain back to its source. And she discovered something crucial. Martin Shore had an accomplice inside Henderson Consulting. Someone in the billing department had been feeding him information about Dawson's projects, helping him create convincing forgeries. The accomplice turned out to be a junior billing clerk named Amy Chin, who Martin had been dating. When confronted with the evidence, she broke down and confessed everything. Martin had convinced her that Paul had wronged him, that he deserved revenge. She'd provided the information, not realizing how much damage it would cause. With Amy's testimony and the technical evidence, Catherine built an airtight case. She presented it to Dawson Industries' CEO personally, flying to their headquarters with Paul to deliver the evidence in person. The CEO, a stern woman named Margaret Powell, reviewed the materials carefully. This is very thorough, she said finally. It appears you've been the victims of a sophisticated fraud. We have, Paul confirmed. And we understand if you need time to verify everything independently. But we wanted you to know that Henderson Consulting has never and will never engage in fraudulent billing. Our reputation is built on integrity. Margaret studied them both. I've worked with your company for 5 years, Paul. In that time, I've never had reason to question your ethics. This whole situation felt wrong from the start, but when I saw those emails, I had to act. We understand completely, Catherine said. In your position, we would have done the same thing. Tell me about you, Margaret said, turning her attention to Catherine. I don't believe we've met. Catherine Hale, Director of Operations for Henderson Consulting. And my fiancée, Paul added, pride evident in his voice. Margaret's eyebrows rose. Really? Office romance. Something like that, Catherine said, smiling. More like he rescued me from a terrible situation and I fell in love with his kindness. Interesting. Paul, I've known you for years and never seen you this happy. This woman must be something special. She is, Paul said simply. She's the one who figured out the emails were fake. She's the one who uncovered the conspiracy. She's the one who's been holding everything together while I've been panicking about losing our biggest client. Margaret looked thoughtful. Catherine, what's your background? Before Henderson Consulting? Catherine hesitated. She could make something up, paint a prettier picture. But honesty had always served her better than pretense. I worked in a textile factory until it closed down, she said. Before that, I was a single mother struggling to keep my daughter fed and housed. Paul gave me a chance when I had nothing, and I've been working to prove I deserved it ever since. And have you? Proved it? Every single day, Paul said firmly. Catherine is the most capable person I've ever worked with. Her intelligence, her work ethic, her ability to see solutions others miss, it's extraordinary. Hiring her was the best business decision I've ever made. Margaret smiled slightly. High praise. All right, I've made my decision. We're reinstating the contract, effective immediately. The termination was based on false information, so it's void. And I'm adding a clause that any future concerns come directly to me for review before any action is taken. Relief flooded through Catherine. Thank you, Margaret. We won't let you down. See that you don't. Margaret stood, shaking both their hands. And congratulations on your engagement. Paul, you're lucky to have found someone who fights for what's yours. I know, Paul said, his eyes on Catherine. Believe me, I know. On the flight home, Paul was quiet. Catherine, exhausted from the stress of the past week, dozed against his shoulder. When she woke, he was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked sleepily. You saved the business, Paul said. You do realize that, right? Without you, without your quick thinking and determination, we would have lost Dawson and probably several other clients too. The company would have survived, but it would have been badly damaged. We're a team, Catherine said. You've saved me more times than I can count. I'm glad I could return the favor. It's more than that. Paul took her hand. Catherine, you've grown so much in the past year. From the woman I met at the grocery store to the powerhouse who just convinced our biggest client to give us another chance. You're extraordinary. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. You saw that in me before I saw it myself. You gave me a chance to become this person. No. I just removed the obstacles that were in your way. You became this person through your own effort and talent. Back at the office, news of the reinstated contract spread quickly. The employees who'd been worried about layoffs celebrated. Ruth brought champagne to the office. Trevor organized an impromptu party in the conference room. That evening at home with Bella, Catherine finally let herself relax. The crisis was over. The business was safe. And she'd proven to herself, once and for all, that she belonged in Paul's world not because he'd brought her there, but because she'd earned her place through hard work and skill. Mommy, you look happy, Bella observed over dinner. I'm happy, baby. It was a hard week at work, but we figured everything out. Paul says you're a superhero, Bella said matter-of-factly. He told me on the phone that you saved the day. Catherine laughed. I don't know about superhero. I just did my job. That's what superheroes always say, Bella insisted. That night, after Bella was asleep, Paul called. I've been thinking, he said. About the business, about the future. Okay, Catherine said cautiously. I want to make you a partner. Not just director of operations, but a full equity partner in Henderson Consulting. You've earned it, and I want you to have a real stake in what we're building. Catherine sat down hard on the couch. Paul, that's huge. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. You're brilliant at what you do, Catherine. And I want to spend the rest of my career building this business with you by my side, as my equal partner. I'd be honored, Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for proving me right to believe, Paul said. Now get some rest. We have a wedding to finish planning, and I need my partner sharp and ready. Catherine hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of her apartment, processing everything that had happened. A year ago she'd had nothing. Now she had everything. A career she loved, a man who cherished her, a daughter who was thriving, and a future bright with possibility. The road to get here hadn't been easy. There had been struggles and doubts and moments where she'd wanted to give up. But she'd kept fighting, kept pushing forward, kept choosing hope even when hope seemed foolish. And it had brought her here. To this moment. To this life. She thought about the woman she'd been, standing outside that grocery store with an empty basket. That woman had been broken but not defeated. Scared but not hopeless. She'd had just enough strength left to accept help when it was offered. And that choice, that single choice to let Paul into her life, had changed everything. Catherine looked at her engagement ring, sparkling in the lamplight. In 3 weeks, she would marry the man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. They would build a life together, raise Bella together, work together to make the world a little better. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible. And she'd earned every bit of it. The week before the wedding was chaos. Final dress fittings, last-minute vendor confirmations, guests arriving from out of town. Catherine juggled wedding planning with her new responsibilities as a partner at Henderson Consulting, barely sleeping as she tried to keep everything on track. Thursday evening, 5 days before the ceremony, Paul insisted they take a break. He'd made dinner reservations at Azure, the rooftop restaurant where they'd had their first official date as a couple. We need this, he said when Catherine protested she had too much to do. One evening to just be us before the craziness of the wedding weekend. Catherine agreed, asking Ruth to watch Bella. She wore a green dress and her favorite heels, wanting to look special for Paul. The restaurant was as beautiful as she remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city lights stretching to the horizon. Their table was in a quiet corner, lit by candles that cast everything in a warm glow. They ordered wine and appetizers, talking about the week's events. The crisis with Dawson Industries had resolved completely, Martin Shore was facing legal consequences for fraud, and business was booming. Everything was finally stable and successful. "I can't believe we're getting married in 5 days," Catherine said, sipping her wine. "Having second thoughts?" Paul asked, though his tone was light. "Not even for a second." "You." "Never." Paul reached across the table and took her hand. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about for a while now." His serious tone made her nervous. "What is it?" "When I met you, when I saw you at that grocery store, I told myself I was helping because of Dorothy. Because of the promise I'd made to pay forward the kindness she'd shown me." "Okay," Catherine said slowly. "But that wasn't the whole truth." Paul's thumb traced circles on her palm. "The moment I saw you, even before I knew your story, I felt something. An attraction, a connection. You were beautiful and strong, and there was something about you that called to me." Catherine's heart began to race. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that yes, I wanted to help you. But I also wanted to know you. To be near you. And as I got to know you and Bella, those feelings grew into something I couldn't ignore." Paul's eyes were intense. "I fell in love with you so fast, Catherine. By the time you started working for me, I already knew you were special. When we started dating, it felt like coming home to something I didn't know I'd been missing." "I felt it too," Catherine admitted. "Almost from the beginning. You made me feel safe and seen." "But here's what I need you to know," Paul continued. "I've never regretted a single thing I did to help you. Not the groceries, not the apartment, not the job. But I also need you to understand that it was never just charity. It was always partly selfish because I wanted you in my life. I wanted the chance to know you, to love you." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. "You told me once that you worry people see you as a project, someone I rescued out of pity. But Catherine, you saved me just as much as I saved you. After Hannah died, I was just existing. Going through the motions. You brought me back to life. You gave me a reason to wake up excited about the day ahead. You reminded me what it feels like to hope and dream and plan for a future." Tears streamed down Catherine's face. "Paul? Let me finish," he said gently. "You and Bella, you didn't just fill my table or my house. You filled my heart. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever, the ability to love and be loved, to be part of a family, to matter to someone." He pulled something from his jacket pocket. It was a folded piece of paper, worn and creased like it had been handled many times. "Do you remember our first dinner at my house? When I offered you the job?" Catherine nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "That night after you left, I wrote this. A list of all the things I hoped for you and for me. I want to read it to you now." He unfolded the paper and began reading. "I hope Catherine takes the job and thrives in it. I hope Bella grows up strong and confident, never doubting her worth. I hope Catherine learns to trust again, to let people help her without feeling ashamed. I hope I can be worthy of the chance she's giving me. I hope she sees herself the way I see her, capable, brilliant, beautiful. I hope someday she might see me as more than just her boss. I hope I get to be part of their lives for a long time. I hope I don't screw this up." Paul folded the paper and looked at Catherine with eyes full of love. "Every single one of those hopes came true," he said. "You did thrive. Bella is strong and confident. You learned to trust. You let me love you. And in 2 weeks, I get to marry you and officially become part of your family forever." Catherine was sobbing now, overwhelmed by the depth of Paul's feelings, by the realization of how long he'd been hoping and planning and loving her. "I wrote something too," she managed to say. "After our first date. Want to hear it?" Paul nodded, his own eyes bright with tears. Catherine pulled out her phone, scrolling to a note she'd saved almost a year ago. "I'm terrified of Paul Henderson. Not because he's scary, but because he makes me want things I thought I'd given up on. He makes me hope for a future that includes love and partnership and someone to share my life with. He's kind to Bella, patient with me, generous in ways I never expected. I'm falling for him, and it's the most frightening and wonderful thing I've ever felt. I hope I'm brave enough to let him in. I hope he's patient with me while I figure out how to trust again. I hope this is real and not just a beautiful dream I'll wake up from." She looked up at Paul, seeing her own emotions reflected in his face. "It was real," she said. "It's always been real. And I don't ever want to wake up from this." Paul stood and came around the table, pulling Catherine to her feet and into his arms. They stood together in the middle of the restaurant, holding each other while other diners smiled and looked away, giving them privacy for their moment. "I love you," Paul whispered into her hair. "I love you so completely it scares me sometimes. You're my best friend, my partner, the person I want to spend every day with. You make everything better just by being in it." "I love you too," Catherine said. "You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. You gave me not just material things but hope and purpose and a future worth fighting for. You're my hero, Paul. My love. My everything." They kissed there in the restaurant, oblivious to everything else. When they finally pulled apart, the server was waiting nearby with dessert and a knowing smile. "On the house," he said, setting down chocolate cake with "Congratulations" written in sauce. For the happy couple. They ate dessert slowly, talking about everything and nothing. The wedding, their honeymoon plans to Italy, Bella's excitement about being a flower girl. But also deeper things. Their fears, their hopes, their dreams for the future they were building together. "I want more children," Paul said suddenly. "With you. If you want that too." Catherine's heart swelled. "I'd love that. Bella would be thrilled to be a big sister. And I want us to build something beyond the businesses. A legacy of kindness and generosity like Dorothy's. I want to create programs that help single parents like you were, give them the same chances you got." "We could create a foundation," Catherine suggested. "Focus on education, job training, childcare assistance. All the things that make it so hard for single parents to get ahead." Paul's eyes lit up. "That's perfect. The Catherine and Bella Foundation. Named after the two people who taught me what really matters." "The Dorothy Parker Foundation," Catherine countered. "Named after the woman who started it all." They talked for hours, planning their future with excitement and joy. By the time they left the restaurant, it was after midnight. Paul drove Catherine home, walking her to her door like he always did. "5 more days," he said, kissing her goodnight. "5 more days and you'll be my wife." "I can't wait," Catherine said honestly. "I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life." Inside her apartment, Catherine found Ruth asleep on the couch and Bella in bed, peaceful and secure. She paid Ruth and thanked her, then went to check on her daughter. Bella had fallen asleep with a drawing on her pillow, a picture of Catherine, Paul and herself, holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in careful letters, Bella had written, "My family." Catherine's throat tightened with emotion. This was her family now. This beautiful, imperfect, chosen family that had come together through kindness and courage and love. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. Every struggle, every moment of despair, every time she'd wanted to give up but pushed forward anyway. All of it had led to this, to love, to belonging, to a future bright with promise. Tomorrow she would return to work, to the business she now owned part of, to the colleagues who had become friends. She would make final wedding preparations, confirm details, tie up loose ends. But tonight she would simply be grateful. Grateful for Paul and his generous heart. Grateful for Bella and her innocent wisdom. Grateful for the community that had embraced them. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings and the power of one person's kindness to change everything. Catherine kissed Bella's forehead and whispered, "Sweet dreams, baby girl. We're going to have such a beautiful life." And she knew with absolute certainty that they would. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the sky a brilliant blue without a cloud in sight. Catherine woke early, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. In just a few hours she would become Mrs. Paul Henderson. Ruth arrived at 8 with coffee and breakfast, taking charge of the morning preparations. She'd volunteered to be Catherine's unofficial wedding coordinator, making sure every detail went smoothly. "Eat," she commanded, handing Catherine a bagel. "You'll need your strength. It's going to be a long, wonderful day." Bella bounced around the apartment in her purple dress, too excited to sit still. "I get to throw flower petals," she kept saying. Real flower petals from the garden. Catherine's sister Nicole had flown in the day before and was staying at Paul's house with his parents. They would all meet at the Botanical Gardens at 2 for the ceremony. At noon, Catherine, Bella and Ruth headed to the venue. The gardens were spectacular, the spring flowers in full bloom. The ceremony would take place in the same gazebo where Paul had proposed, surrounded by flowering trees and carefully manicured gardens. In a small room set aside for the bridal party, Catherine put on her dress. It was simple but elegant, a blue gown with delicate lace details and a flowing skirt. She'd chosen blue because it was Paul's favorite color on her, and because she wanted to honor their tradition rather than follow conventions. Ruth helped with her hair and makeup, keeping everything natural and classic. Bella watched in awe as her mother transformed. "You look like a princess, Mommy," she breathed. "You look like one too, sweet girl," Catherine said, admiring Bella in her purple gown. At 1:30, guests began arriving. 50 people just as they'd planned. Paul's parents and siblings, Nicole, Ruth's family, Trevor and his boyfriend, colleagues from Henderson Consulting, a few of Paul's old friends from college. Margaret Powell from Dawson Industries had even come, having become friends with Catherine over the past months. And in the front row, reserved with a white ribbon, a single empty chair with a framed photo of Dorothy Parker. Paul's way of honoring the woman who had started everything. At exactly 2 o'clock, music began to play. Bella walked down the aisle first, scattering purple and white flower petals with serious concentration. The guests smiled and whispered about how adorable she was. Then Catherine appeared, and the world seemed to hold its breath. She walked alone, no one to give her away because she belonged to herself and chose to give herself to Paul freely. Down the petal-strewn path she went, her eyes locked on Paul standing in the gazebo, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark blue suit that matched her dress. When she reached him, Paul's eyes were bright with tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "So are you," she whispered back. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, promising not just love but partnership, honesty, courage and kindness. They promised to build a life based on the values that had brought them together: generosity, compassion, and hope. When Paul said, "I do," his voice rang clear and certain. When Catherine said, "I do," she meant it with every fiber of her being. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Paul kissed Catherine while their guests cheered and applauded. Bella ran up to join them and Paul scooped her up, the three of them embracing as a family for the first time officially. The reception was held in the garden's event hall, decorated with purple and white flowers, candles, and simple elegance. Dinner was served family-style at long tables, encouraging conversation and connection among the guests. Paul and Catherine's first dance was to a classic love song, both of them moving clumsily but happily, laughing at their own lack of grace. Then Paul danced with Bella, who stood on his feet while he waltzed her around the floor. Ruth gave a toast that had everyone crying and laughing. She talked about watching Catherine transform from a scared new employee into a confident businesswoman, about seeing Paul come alive again after years of just going through the motions, about how love and kindness could change everything. Trevor's toast was funny and touching, full of jokes about office romance and stories about Paul's terrible attempts at making coffee before Catherine took over the office kitchen. As the sun set and the party continued, Catherine found a quiet moment to stand outside, looking at the gardens bathed in golden light. Paul found her there, slipping his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About everything. About how far we've come." Catherine leaned into him. "A year and a half ago I was standing outside a grocery store thinking my life was over. And now look at me. Look at us. Look at what you built," Paul corrected gently. "I gave you some help, yes. But you did the work, Catherine. You rebuilt your life through courage and determination. I'm just lucky you let me be part of it." "We built it together," Catherine said firmly. "Your generosity gave me the foundation. My hard work built the structure. But the life we have now, that's something we created together, piece by piece, day by day." Bella came running out, her dress stained with cake frosting and her hair coming loose from its careful styling. "Mommy, Dad, they're about to cut the cake again. Come on, Dad." Bella had started calling Paul that a month ago, and every time she said it, Paul's eyes lit up with joy. They went back inside together, the three of them, to celebrate with their community. The party lasted late into the evening, full of dancing and laughter and love. Around 10, as things were winding down, Paul stood and asked for everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for being here to celebrate with us today. Catherine and I are incredibly grateful for your support and love." He looked around the room at faces dear to them. "But I also want to make an announcement. Something Catherine and I have been working on quietly for the past few months." Catherine smiled, knowing what was coming. "We're establishing a foundation," Paul continued. "The Dorothy Parker Foundation for Family Success. Its mission is to help single parents who are struggling, to provide the kind of support and opportunities that changed Catherine's life and, in turn, changed mine." He explained the foundation's programs: job training, childcare assistance, housing support, educational scholarships. Everything designed to help families break cycles of poverty and build stable, successful lives. "We're starting with a $50 million endowment," Paul said. And we're inviting anyone who wants to contribute to join us. Because kindness isn't about one person helping another. It's about creating ripples that spread outward, changing lives and communities and, eventually, the world. The room erupted in applause. Several people immediately pledged donations. Margaret Powell stood and announced that Dawson Industries would contribute $5 million over 5 years. Catherine felt overwhelming gratitude and joy. This foundation, this legacy of kindness, it was their way of paying forward everything they'd been given. After the reception ended and the guests departed, Catherine, Paul, and Bella went back to Paul's house, which was now officially their house. They decided to keep Catherine's apartment for now, renting it out to another family in need at a reduced rate. Bella fell asleep in the car, exhausted from the excitement. Paul carried her inside and tucked her into her new bedroom, which they decorated together with purple walls and a window seat filled with pillows. In their own bedroom, Catherine and Paul finally had a moment alone. They changed out of their wedding clothes, both too keyed up to sleep despite the late hour. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Henderson?" Paul asked, pulling Catherine close. "Like the luckiest woman in the world," Catherine said honestly. "And a little overwhelmed. Everything happened so fast." "We can slow down now," Paul assured her. "The foundation can wait. Work can wait. We have our whole lives to build everything we've dreamed of." They talked late into the night, lying in bed together, planning their future. The foundation they would build. The family they hoped to grow. The trips they wanted to take with Bella. The difference they wanted to make in the world. "I've been thinking," Catherine said, "about my story. About how I got from that grocery store to here." "What about it?" "I want to share it. Not to brag or seek sympathy, but to give hope to other people who are struggling. To show them that second chances exist, that kindness is real, that they're not alone." "I think that's beautiful," Paul said. "How do you want to share it? Maybe through the foundation? A blog or a video series? Other single parents telling their stories too, showing the different paths to stability and success." "Let's do it," Paul agreed immediately. "Your story is powerful, Catherine. It deserves to be told." They finally fell asleep around 2 in the morning, wrapped in each other's arms, the moonlight streaming through the windows of their shared room. When Catherine woke the next morning, she found Bella curled up at the foot of their bed, having snuck in sometime during the night. Paul was still asleep, one arm draped protectively across both Catherine and Bella. This was her family. Her home. Her life. Catherine carefully slid out of bed and went downstairs, brewing coffee in the kitchen. Through the window she could see the backyard garden, already bright with morning sun. She thought about the empty basket, about standing on that sidewalk thinking her world had ended. She thought about Paul's voice behind her, offering help when she'd lost all hope. One moment. One person's kindness. That's all it had taken to change everything. Catherine pulled out her phone and started writing, capturing her thoughts while they were fresh. "The day I met Paul Henderson, I had $4.63 in my wallet and a 7-year-old daughter who'd been asking when we'd have dinner. I stood outside a grocery store with an empty basket, turned away because I couldn't get credit, wondering how I'd failed so completely at taking care of my child." She paused, the memory still sharp even now. "Then a stranger approached and offered to help. I could have refused. Pride, fear, caution, they all told me to say no. But desperation and a mother's love made me brave enough to accept." The words flowed as she described their journey, the grocery shopping, the apartment hunt, the job offer, the growing relationship. She wrote about fear and trust, about learning to accept help, about discovering her own strength. "Paul gave me groceries that first night. He filled my table, kept his promise. But more than that, he filled my life with possibility. He saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself. He gave me a chance to prove what I could become." Catherine wrote about the job, about learning and growing, about finding skills she never knew she had. About falling in love with a kind man who treated her like an equal. About watching Bella thrive in a stable, loving environment. But here's the truth, Paul's money didn't save me. His kindness did. His belief in me did. His willingness to give a stranger a chance did. The money helped, absolutely. But what changed my life was being seen, valued, given an opportunity to show what I was capable of. She wrote about the foundation they were starting, about their mission to help other families in crisis. Kindness is contagious. It creates ripples that spread far beyond the original act. Paul's generosity to me has already touched dozens of lives through my work at Henderson Consulting, through the support we've given to employees, through the foundation we're building. And I hope those ripples will continue spreading, touching thousands more. When Paul came downstairs an hour later, Bella in tow, he found Catherine still writing. "What are you working on?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "Our story. The first post for the Foundation blog." Catherine showed him what she'd written. Paul read it carefully, his expression growing soft. "It's perfect. Raw and honest and hopeful. That's what I want people to feel," Catherine said. "Hope. Because if I can go from desperate and scared to this, to having everything I've ever dreamed of, then anything is possible for anyone." Over breakfast, they talked about the Foundation's launch. They'd start small, helping a few families at a time, learning what worked and what didn't. Catherine would manage it part-time alongside her work at Henderson Consulting, with Paul providing financial oversight and strategic guidance. "I want to be hands-on," Catherine insisted. "I want to meet the families, understand their stories, help them navigate the process." I remember how overwhelming it all was. Having someone who'd been through it, who understood, that would have meant everything. "Then that's what we'll do," Paul agreed. 6 months later, the Dorothy Parker Foundation helped its first family, a single father named James Okafor who'd lost his job when his son was diagnosed with cancer. The foundation covered rent while James completed a coding boot camp, then helped him land a job with a tech startup. Within a year, James was stable, saving money, and able to focus on his son's recovery. His thank you letter to Catherine made her cry. "You showed me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You gave me hope when I thought hope was gone. My son and I have a future now, and it's because you cared enough to help a stranger." That letter went on the Foundation's wall, the first of hundreds that would eventually cover every surface of their office. Over the next few years, Catherine and Paul's life continued to blossom. Bella thrived, growing into a confident, compassionate teenager who volunteered with the Foundation and talked about becoming a social worker someday. Catherine and Paul had 2 more children, twins named Hannah and Dorothy, honoring the women who had shaped their lives. Henderson Consulting expanded internationally, with Catherine as Chief Operating Officer, managing operations across 12 countries. The Dorothy Parker Foundation helped over 5,000 families in its first 5 years, with plans to scale even further. But more than the professional success, more than the money or the growth, what mattered was the love they'd built. Sunday dinners remained sacred, now with a bigger table to accommodate their growing family and extended friend circle. They traveled together, worked together, built a life rich in love and purpose. And every year on the anniversary of that day at the grocery store, Catherine and Paul returned to the same spot. They'd buy groceries and donate them to families in need, remembering where they'd started, honoring how far they'd come. On their 10th anniversary, standing outside Green's Market with bags of groceries for the local food bank, Paul took Catherine's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Saying yes that day? Letting me into your life?" Catherine looked at her husband, the father of her children, her partner in every sense of the word. She thought about the beautiful mess of their life, the chaos of raising 3 kids, the demands of running businesses and a foundation, the occasional arguments and the constant negotiations of sharing a life with another person. "Not for a single second," she said firmly. "You promised to fill my table that night. You filled my whole life instead." "We filled each other's lives," Paul corrected, pulling her close. "That's what love does. It fills the empty spaces, it creates abundance from scarcity, it turns loneliness into belonging." They stood together in the parking lot where it had all begun, no longer strangers but soulmates, remembering the kindness that had changed everything. Because in the end, that's what it came down to. Not money or power or success but simple human kindness. One person seeing another's need and choosing to help. One person brave enough to accept that help despite pride and fear. That single choice, repeated daily in small ways and large, had built a life more beautiful than either of them had dared to imagine. Catherine Hale Henderson went home that evening to a house full of noise and love and chaos. To a daughter excited about her high school art show, to twins arguing over which bedtime story they wanted to hear, to a husband who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. She made dinner with Paul, the 2 of them moving around the kitchen in practiced synchronicity. They sat down at their big wooden table, the one they'd bought specifically because it could fit so many people, so much love. And as she looked around at her family, at this beautiful life they'd built from kindness and hope and courage, Catherine Hale Henderson smiled. Her table was full. Her heart was fuller. And she'd never been more grateful to be alive.